be based on the lunch conversation, I really want to talk about what we talked about there,
Yeah.
or at least get the hot takes, right? So, well, I'll say this. The CISO role is essentially the CIO scapegoat.
I think that in some scenarios it's true, right? Like the CISO came about from the CIO needing to take a part of what generally would be their responsibility and give it more focus, right? Like the whether it's advocating responsibility, whether it's splitting responsibility, right? I think it definitely depends on the CIO and what they're going for. A lot of times I think it happened because the CIO wasn't doing some things, and maybe the CEO needed, they read in a magazine, or they got a new risk and compliance officer, and that came about. And there are like real regulations that actually name CISO as a mandatory role in generally publicly traded companies.
Mm-hmm.
The state of New York actually has it written in their state law that corporations have to have a named CISO. For a while, like FINRA and SIPC on the financial services side had reference to an officer like a CISO. They didn't specifically call it a CISO, but they've backed it down a little bit since then. But there are like real regulatory requirements sometimes for that title. Generally, it's someone that's responsible or accountable for risk and accountability within the organization. Almost like a fiduciary, where you have to speak the truth about what's really going on in your corporation, where the CIO or even the CEO, right, they're really supposed to be focused on bettering the business, making customer satisfaction better, making the CSAT scores better, or whatever you need from a corporate perspective to gather more clients or customers, or whether it's internal or external.
Yeah, so when you describe it like that, maybe scapegoat's the wrong word, right? Because it's not necessarily that you're blaming them, but it's almost like a family, right? So
a dysfunctional one.
A dysfunctional
one. Times.
So I guess when I say family, let me tell you what I mean. So my wife stays home with the kids, and she does everything. She does the homeschooling with them. She does not necessarily the cooking. I do a lot of the cooking at the house, so I usually cook breakfast, lunch, and dinner for everyone. But she schedules like events for them. She schedules any sort of like play date. She gets all their school supplies. She goes on and buys all the stuff. She does like their planning, right? Like if you ask her what they're doing today, she'll have a list. And we have something called a skylight, I think is what it's called, and it's it looks like a 19-inch TV.
Smart board kind of thing.
Yeah. So we have that in our kitchen. So when you're walking from the living room to the kitchen, on the right-hand side, there's a calendar, but it also has like pictures and all this other stuff. But the calendar has a kid's chore chart and what they're doing for the day for school. So if they ever wake up early, which they never do, but they want to start school early, they wake up, check their stuff, and then they start, ticking it off, and then she'll do all that. Only reason I know about that is because she told me about it, right? But if you were to ask me what my kids do all day, I would say I have no idea, because I really don't. Like I'm either gone for a little bit, I'll come back like to cook, and then I'll leave again, or I'll be here doing this, or maybe I'll be doing something else like a lunch event or like a happy hour. I'll do all these different things, right? So I don't know, right? And when I think of my role as the father and knowing what the day-to-day activity, to me, that kind of feels like CEO, CIO compared to CISO, where I know that things are being done, and I know that there is someone in charge of that, which is, my wife, but I couldn't tell you all the details. And it's not like she's a scapegoat, right? But she is the one that's in charge of making sure everything runs from like the household perspective. And maybe that's just a better way to phrase it.
Let me ask you a question then.
Yeah, go ahead.
Which of those roles do you think is most important?
When you think about raising kids, I think the responsibility of a parent is to make sure that your kids grow up to be successful, right? That they're educated enough to get a good job, maybe start their own business, find a passion, find what they enjoy, right? Because there's a lot of people that are unhappy with life. There's a lot of people unhappy with work, right? And I think a result of that is maybe they just didn't have the right guidance to find their passion and try and make
Mm.
money doing that. So I think when I think of that, when you ask that question, I think of more so how what's more important is raising your children to be successful. I think as a parent, that's
Yeah.
kind of like the goal. It's not just to, just have a kid and hope that they do well. It's, you brought them into the world and it's your responsibility to ensure that they are successful, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like a mentor.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I think the most important one is what my wife does. Now, the one that gets all the credit is me. And this is a
Yeah.
this is a true story. So, like say for example, like Thanksgiving is around the corner. My wife, whenever we go to a family thing, they always talk about the things that I'm doing.
Yeah.
Right? They talk about, oh, he's doing this, he's got this going on. There's this, like just whatever, right?
Yeah.
Maybe like the bodybuilding thing. Maybe they talk about that, or maybe they talk about like the podcast studio, and it's like all these things that I am doing, right? But a lot of that comes as a result of my wife, right? So she'll be there, she'll be supporting it, right?
Yeah.
To be honest, she thought this was like the dumbest idea ever because she saw the price tag.
It's more time out of your schedule, and
Yeah.
yeah.
And then, of course, like the first few recordings that I did were an hour to 3 hours. So, and then the editing time that we had talked about, and all that. So it's like a 20-hour a week thing.
So what you're describing, I think, is a great analogy to the relationship between, and it's changing, right? It's an open conversation in the industry.
Mhm.
What is a CISO role? What is a CIO role? There's rebranding, chief digital officer or chief technology officer. They have different things in different areas, and different companies fundamentally are using those roles differently. But it's that nuance that you just talked about, which is you've got the dad, right?
Mhm.
The person who generally was in charge of either, like you said, you're out, you're working, you're building podcasts, the general things that are going on. But then there's the individual who's in there dialing into the reality, the minutia, the detail, the policies, the procedures,
Yeah.
the daily responsibility, the accountability of, if your kids don't eat, that a company, if they are violating laws or they're violating compliance or regulatory, or they're not following best practices based upon the industry that they're in, that has real ramifications.
Yeah.
The CIO may not know those minutiae, but the CIO should know where they are, right? Like, so that's the reporting structure. And that's why a lot of CISOs get trapped, I feel, is, they may report to the CIO or they report to a CTO, right? There's many layers of separation between them and the board or the CEO, the C-suite. And a lot of times the CIOs have a dual polarity of, their responsibility is good customer satisfaction, technology is working, things are online, people can do their jobs, right? The business can run.
Mm-hmm.
The CISO has the same responsibility, but from almost like a fiduciary level, which is, are we doing things safely? Are we doing securely? Are we doing things legally and ethically? And then privacy comes in. That's a whole other ball of wax, right? So that's that potential pull where the CISO is looking for the bad side of things sometimes, and the CIO wants to show the good side of things.
Yeah.
So if they have to make that choice, that's why CISOs are really saying nowadays that they should report to like a chief risk officer or sometimes the chief legal officer or even straight to the CEO, because they've got bad news a lot of times. And the security guy doesn't want to have the bad news, but we're also there. We have to have responsibility to have that conversation with executive leadership.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a question for you now.
Yeah.
Now that if you think of it like a family, right? Two sides, like doing or having all the bad news all the time, or being the hero, like which one's better? Which one would you pick?
Well, I mean, there's a reason CISOs burn out at a significantly higher rate than CIOs.
So, if you So we're just gonna imaginary question, right? Not like this is the question that everyone always asks at like an event. Like, well, I had a time machine.
Yeah.
What would you do? Would you go back? So like, do you think now that you're in the spot that you're at and you've had the experience that you've had and the exposure to the role, do you think you'd ever go back and go a different path, or would it always have been security?
I think I've had enough different tracks in my life, right? I've been in healthcare, I've done sales, I've done pre-sales, I've been a customer, I've been a client. I think that all of those have led me to where I am today for a reason because of, I enjoy this. So at the end of the day, I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't, enjoying it or happy or having fun. So, but there's a grind associated with being a CISO, right? Because you are a lot of times the bearer of bad news, or at the very least, you're seen as,
A fun blocker.
ask AI, draw a picture of a cybersecurity person versus a storage architect. You're going to get two very different pictures.
Have you done that?
No,
Okay.
but yeah, it'd be fun. Like just think about like what. But I mean, then you're kind of like it's like a sentiment analysis, right? Like the movie style, Mr. Robot, right? Like the hacker in the hoodie, like that's the zeitgeist that's out there in the world. And then the IT guy is the nerd. He's hacking away, and maybe he's got a tie on and at a keyboard, but there's not a sinister, shady darkness behind it that security I think sometimes blends. I think security has done it to themselves by using military language a lot.
Why is that?
Right? It started there, right? Like you SIGINT, radar detection, it all developed in the military space. So that's why we get attackers, threats. The language is there, and it creates a mentality, right? Of a militaristic. We're fighting the war on cyber crime. We're all the different language that comes out of that. I think that shades things a little bit for sure.
I've never thought about it like being military focused, but I guess that's kind of what it is, right? It's like,
Yeah, it's where it started, right? Like there's a great book that actually starts with like where cybersecurity came from, right? It started with, hey, we got these new radar things that can detect planes in the sky. Okay, well, how can I fake that, or how can I create like blow up tanks that look real, right? It's that kind of military gamesmanship, brinksmanship. Then it transitioned into SIGINT, right, where you're signal intelligence. Okay, well, now I got a ping. Oh, that's someone else's submarine under the water pinging us. And then it moved into radio. Can I intercept an encryption? The Enigma machine, right? Ciphers and crypto. Right? It all came from being able to talk without the other side knowing what you're doing. That led into what was it? The phone tapping, right? Being able to tap into phones, and then they added in around the Reagan era. He brought in a new mindset around being able to tap into phones, right? And they had the whole Enigma box, I can't remember what it's called, but where it had to have like two keys to be able to unencrypt phone conversations. But America was very, very focused on personal liberties and privacy, so it got banned, it got taken out. So then that's where we got all the Snowden NSA monitoring and some of the larger kind of monitoring platforms that we have today are, pre-Snowden era. Now they just farm it out to, Verizon and AT&T collect the data for them, and then they can order the FISA court to release the information when they need it, kind of. So the book is called Dark Territory, The Secret History of Cyber War by Fred Kaplan. And it does a really good job of kind of like describing how we got to where we are today, right?
Yeah.
And back to the militaristic language conversation, but back to kind of what you were talking about with the iPhone. I feel iPhone has good marketing, right? They absolutely, it's a more closed ecosystem.
Yeah.
Right. So there's less personal responsibility for managing your device, right? Because Apple kind of keeps you in that walled garden. If someone wants the data off your iPhone, they're going to get the data off your iPhone.
Okay.
Android, I feel, is more, you have to take personal responsibility. You have to not sideload APKs. You have to not install third-party, stores, stuff like that. So it's more, you have personal response. You can blow yourself. It's just like Linux and Windows, right? Like kind of the or even Linux and Mac or Windows and Mac, right? It's all about personal responsibility, and I think Apple makes a little bit of that easier for you, whereas Android lets you
Just
do stupid stuff if you want to, but that's your choice.
yeah. But I think a lot of times people don't know the difference, or not that they know the difference. They don't know what is good or what's bad, right? And and maybe this kind of like heads into like a different topic that I was thinking about, where it comes down to security awareness, right? There are some people that say security awareness is a waste of time, right? And the reason they say that is just because someone is aware of the right thing to do doesn't mean that they will do it,
Absolutely.
right? So it's like so when you think of compliance and risk management as a whole, as a practice, right? A lot of that comes down to, are we doing what's right? Are we doing what we're supposed to be doing? Are we following the guidelines that exist within, our vertical, right? Are we doing things that governing boards would approve,
Yeah.
right? So it becomes like this list of like checkboxing, right? When you work at a larger company, a lot of times, especially like publicly traded companies, they have security awareness, right?
Yep.
Month, right? And I think like October, right? And then usually in October, there is a 1 hour security training,
Yeah.
right?
Yep.
Now, hypothetically speaking, if I was working at a place that had a security awareness training, I may or may not just press play, walk away, and come back and click buttons later. Because you'll notice a lot of times it's answer the question at the end, and if you get it wrong, you can go back and redo it, but you have to get a minimum score.
Yep. A lot of times the minimum score, sometimes they're mean and they don't let you fast forward.
Yeah.
Or,
there's that, or they have like the timer, like you haven't met the minimum time of what they say a normal reading speed would be.
A lot of that. So I'd say early on, awareness training was about bringing that bottom up, right? Like you're never gonna, the 80th, 90th percentile of people that just get it, right? Back to your iPhone, Android analogy, right? Like people that use Androids are generally going to be more interested in that flexibility because XYZ. Maybe they want to play some weird game, or maybe they want to jailbreak it and load a different version of Android, or maybe they just think they can be more secure because they have more control over the data. Apple is more the mainstream, like, okay, it's just 90% of it's safe and secure. So back to security awareness training, it was about bringing up kind of that bottom 30-40% of people that have no experience in cyber, don't even know what a phishing email is, will click every link every time, right? Like they don't have that hygiene. Nowadays, because it was effective, a lot of those are actually baked into third-party certifications.
Okay.
Like have you heard of like a SOC 2 or SOC 2 Type 2? To get some of those criteria met, you have to show that you have an effective education program, that you do track those, right? Like, so it's stuff that you should do anyway, but in order to get this third party to like audit you and certify that, hey, you're good enough to get your gold seal of approval, that you're meeting these criteria. So that's why it's always like an hour of training around a certain amount of time with, a quiz at the end, because that's what they saw made a difference in companies before.
Yeah, but it's like an incremental difference. Like, and maybe, I don't know, this is considered a hot take, but maybe I'll just call it that. And I'm gonna liken it to health.
Yeah.
Right? People know what is good or bad for them to do. Right? When it comes to eating, right? You can eat healthy or you can eat unhealthy. But when you look at the general population, say in America, there is a lot of obesity, right? But people generally know what's good and what's bad, yet they still make bad choices, right? And to me, when you're making a poor choice, and when I say poor choices, I'm not judging. Like, you can look at me. Like, I'm like 5'7", maybe 5'8". I couldn't tell you, but 5'8" and almost 240 pounds. I think on the metrics,
I'm in the unhealthy zone as well
yeah,
myself, right?
I'm in the obese section, right? I could be a lot lighter, but that requires a lot of work and a lot going to the gym and kind of reversing a lot of damage, if you will, that I've done over the years.
But
But I'm not like oozing out of my chair. So to me, it's like, okay. But what that means is along the way, I've made choices that, got me up to 240. And I was okay with it. But if you put on the optics of good versus bad, it's I've made bad choices. And that's for me
mm,
personally, right? So I'm not judging, but in general, there's a lot of people that when they know good versus bad, they don't always go the route of good.
yeah,
So when I think of security, like my assumption, outsider looking in, right, is that when it comes to people's personal health and their personal fitness and personal well-being, like physically, right, people will make bad choices all the time. So then is it wrong to say or assume that people will still do the same thing when it comes to security?
I mean, I think it comes down to understanding the why, right? And then some of these are institutional problems that we just no one individual will ever be right. Or like there's 1,000 answers that are probably as incorrect as they are correct, right? Like in a lot of these ways. So from a looking at it from that lens, you've got your bell curves, right? You're always going to have your people on your extremes of either side of it. So I would say education helps on
Shift
the
it.
low end to
Okay.
get more people into that middle of that bell curve. Policies, procedures, and technology restrictions kind of bring the maybe the people that are maybe trying to look for ways around to be able to do stuff, or maybe they're just curious, right? Like your white hat hackers, or your red team kind of people, right? Where they're always on that edge and looking for a way to claw around, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the in the middle of the road people just want to do their job. So you've got the extremes, and salespeople love the extremes because you can sell to that, right? Like the bell curve, the people that just show up every day and do their job, they don't need VPN, they don't need, but you have to have the guardrails for those. So kind of from your perspective, you know, the unhealthy choice sometimes is just because it's easier,
Yeah.
right? Like to put it in a business perspective, I got my laptop, I'm traveling for work, I need to get on this network right now. Hey, there's free Wi-Fi.
Mm. Like at the airport.
Or I can wait 3 hours till I get to my hotel and log in then. No, I got to do this right now. My boss is screaming at me. I don't have good cell signal. I can't get on. I'm going to jump on this Wi-Fi and then maybe I'll turn VPN on. That was a choice.
Mm-hmm.
You didn't have to do that. You could wait till you get to your hotel. You could, wait till you get better signal, right? There's options. It's just what's expedient and what do I need to do now versus, and those pressures. So then maybe a good corporate culture, that person would be like, oh, I'll just wait till I get to my hotel, right? Because they understand the deadline, they know the requirements. It's not someone screaming at them, do this now.
Yeah.
So that's where the urgency comes in a lot of time in cybersecurity. Why phishing is so effective, because it's, hey, I need a gift card. Hey, I need you to click this link. Hey, I'm the CFO. I need, they buy into that lizard brain kind of requirement that we have, of like urgency and need, right? And then you want to do your job at the end of the day. So I would say, from an expediency perspective, I think that's where you see a lot of security being seen as a roadblock too,
Mm-hmm.
because it's usually the no, right? Like the no side of security that most people see, and those no's come for a reason. Just like every sign on the street came from
Result.
somewhere, some regulatory or some horrible accident or something like that, right? Like there's policies are written in blood in a lot of organizations.
Yeah. So when you said that, it reminded me of when I was in college and I was in physics, and there was a part where we were talking about angular momentum, right? Um, and a couple other things, but one of them was uh, cars traveling on the road. And what I remember is the instructor said, Has anyone ever wondered why there's a speed limit on curves? No, because I just don't want you to crash, right? So we went through uh, a problem essentially where there was the angle of the road,
Mm-hmm.
right, from flat
Yep.
versus angled, and at what angle is safe to travel on? Because at a certain speed, your tires will lose traction, and the weight of the car,
It was pulling away from the road.
affects, yeah, right. And it was one of those things where I was like, I always remember that day where we talked about this, is because it's like when you drive, you see the sign that says 55 max. Like if you're driving down the 101 and you have to hop on the 60, like
Yep.
one, the highway is terrible because it has like these bumps in it. It's like boom, 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 boom. So there's that part of it, but it also there's a speed limit, and of course the road isn't flat and curved; it's angled and curved, right? So we kind of went through this math problem on why you should never hit a curve at a certain above a certain
Yeah.
speed, and it was eye opening because it's like you don't necessarily think of the safety of how fast you're or how safe it is to travel on a road if it's flat. And I think the general assumption is it's just the road, but now it's just curved. But there are things that come into
Yeah.
play, like physics, that say otherwise, that
Yep.
it's not safe.
So the
And
Android phone is going to let you go 120 around that curve. The iPhone is going to govern your car based upon the speed of that road.
mhm,
And those signs are your policies and procedures telling you what not to do.
yeah,
Right? Like think of it from that. Like that's literally security from technology and paper process perspective.
yeah. So I guess the idea there is security exists around us today,
Yeah.
but no one bats an eye,
No,
right?
I work in a financial services industry, and I work with CPAs. Nobody understands risk better than a CPA. Financial risk, like if I can couch a conversation in a financial risk term,
Mhm.
I instantly understand it. As soon as I start talking about, policies or firewalls or VPNs or endpoint protection or even ransomware, right? Like they just gloss over, right? So it's the same conversation you need to have. You need to couch your conversation in the perspective of the individual you're working with.
Yeah, like cater to the audience,
Yeah.
right? But it is interesting to think that like if so Mike, episode 1, right? He talked about imagine a world where you could drive at any speed, crash, and then just not be reborn again, but respawn.
Mm-hmm.
It would be endless crashes,
Yeah.
right? And people just go and crash and burn, respawn, and then go again. But you can't do that. That's not how the real world works. At least for the rest of us living,
Yep.
who knows what comes after, right? But it's like you can't do that perceivably and respawn. So there's speed limits, right? And then there are ramifications if you happen to, get caught by a cop. You're going to go to jail, right?
Yep.
There's all these things that are in place, but I don't think necessarily people look at it as this is security in the same sense that when they think of security from a business perspective. Yeah. But yet it's fine for everyone to follow traffic signals, right? And you're always going to get the people that roll through a stop sign. I do it.
The red light cameras exist for a reason.
Yeah.
Like
there's all this stuff in place, but people will still make choices that are against, we'll say, the law.
Yeah.
I think it's just human nature. So if you look at it from the optics of human nature, and not saying all people will make bad choices, but generally they do. Does security ever get to a point where if you're incrementally shifting right of the bell curve, or you're shifting more people to the center, right, as you described earlier, is there ever a point in like 20 or 30 years where the random HR person doesn't get phished anymore? Or do you think there's an evolution to security where the people will generally learn enough to get to a point where a security professional will look back and say, hey, we've come a long way from 30 years ago? Or is it more so like, a Gen Z person that's coming up in the world doesn't necessarily care about it?
I think there's going to be fundamental changes in the technology that we use because of security. Look at encryption, right? Mm-hmm. Encryption wasn't a thing when we first started emailing HTTPS wasn't a thing for the first, 10 plus years of the internet, right? You would go to a website and then maybe once in a while you would jump over to like a payment portal and that would be encrypted.
I remember when the payment forms were the only ones with the S. And the rule was if you're ever transferring your credit card
Only
information,
you make sure the S
only
is a
with the
lockup.
S.
And now everything, like you go to a website that doesn't have HTTPS today,
and you feel dirty.
and it's like you don't even get on. Like if you're on Chrome or it's like nope, you can't go. This is insecure.
Or they tell
Right?
you this
So-
leading you to a bad spot.
I think there's always going to be fundamental changes that just from a customer satisfaction perspective feel transparent.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think passkeys is probably the newest kind of shift in mentality where now it's easy to not have a password. It's easy to have 2 or 3 FA process, but it just feels easy, right? It's, blip, I logged in to my Microsoft account. I don't know my password. Oh, but I hit yes, that's me, and it has a geolocation, but that's more secure than putting in your password. So those technologies are going to come along that make security transparent, but there's always going to be something new, AI, quantum, right? Like those are heavy, hard things to solve. Even just, like I would say like generative AI is a DLP problem from a corporate perspective, right? But
for sure.
But the tools that AI is giving the malicious actors in the industry are, incrementally increasing the complexity of things like phishing and vishing and spear phishing and even you can't even trust a Zoom anymore.
What do you mean, like a Zoom call?
Yeah, like just deep fakes. Like they just
yeah.
I haven't followed up on it, but like it was probably 3-4 months ago. A bank in Hong Kong, one of their
they hired the
FP&A,
guy.
No, one of their FP&A analysts got a Zoom call from the CFO. Video.
Okay.
Hey, I need you to wire transfer this money. We're doing this transaction. Blah 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 blah. Okay, sir. $25 million sent.
Gone.
It was a deepfake. Like I said, I haven't followed up on it. It could have been FUD. It could have been they were working together and that was just their excuse. I don't know specific, but those are real things that I could see being a real problem in the future.
Yeah, it could have been a company that has a product that, finds that, right? But we can stop this, right?
Yeah.
Look, we just, if they had us, we would have.
So I don't think there's ever as long as humans exist and we're not in a AI simulation ourselves, like
The Matrix.
Yeah, right. Like, there's always going to be people that want to find the edge case, and there's always going to be people that are just too bored and maybe lazy or don't care to even think about the ramifications of what they're doing. Right, like that's human nature. I don't think that's changed in thousands and thousands of years.
So people in like security tend to be the ones that I don't want to say overanalyze, but definitely think of outcome based decisions.
So, and then that's, obviously it's a generalization, but, I think that's why security is such a cool space for a lot of people because it's an area that you don't have to be a techno nerd, right? It helps, like if you're a programmer or you come from IT, but like some of the best analysts I've ever seen came from like financial accounting or like fraud or, they get numbers, they understand patterns. So I think that's what's kind of fun about security in general is it's not always a technical problem. Like sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's being able to articulate business and risk. Sometimes it's just being able to write a document that people can understand of like a policy, like what you can and what you can't do. Policy versus procedure versus process, right? Like those mean things in a GRC world, governance, risk, and compliance. But a lot of people think those are the same thing, right? So like having, so you get the technical writers and you get the people that really like that kind of stuff and minutia and detail matter.
Yeah. So there's definitely, it feels like a spectrum, right? There's like different like wavelengths, right? When I think of spectrum, I think of wavelengths like radio waves, gamma rays, light, right? All these different things, and depending on the frequency, you either see it or you don't. And like
business is radio waves, right? Like it's the big,
big,
broad, and security is down on
The far right gamma,
little tiny
X-rays.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like the idea of security cover, from like visibility, right? Is or I guess now the visible spectrum is really small. I forget how many nanometers it is, but it's like color and light is a small percentage of the overall spectrum, right? But that's probably where most of this actually exists, right? That kind of becomes like the bell curve.
Well, I would say, in my opinion, most security that people see is because it's hindering something. It's more of I think a negative aspect. Good security should feel like it's part of what you're trying to accomplish, whether it be business, whether it be driving a car, whether it be on your phone. I feel security, and even IT. I think IT has always had the mindset of, good IT is invisible IT, right? But that also lends to people, it's like almost like an insurance program at that point, right? It's if I don't see it and I don't use it, do I need it? So it's that catch-22. If you're really good at what you're doing, people may not see the value in what you're doing. So, that's why breaches became a big thing, and you have to publicize those, and it becomes a pain point for organizations. Look at what the SEC is doing, right? They're getting flooded with they have the new regulatory requirement for a material incident in a publicly traded company must be communicated to the SEC. They don't explain what material is. That's up to your own interpretation. So good businesses have internal risk registers and policies to say, hey, anything over this much and it may be tied to your insurance policy is a material, whether it be reputation, whether it be, money, whether it be we had to pay something. You have to report to that to the SEC now. Like that's a hard requirement. Like you will go to jail if you don't do this kind of stuff. But that didn't exist before. Well, I mean, it did in other areas and other industries. And then they had like HIPAA is a great example where if you expose patients' data, right, you had to notify the government of that incident. So you're seeing more and more of that. And CCPA, CPRA in California, Texas has their own regulation, Florida, every state has like their own little mini GDPR now almost from a privacy perspective for notifying of breach. State of New York has one coming up that's making CISOs super, super excited that actually has fines and jail terms dictated. I don't know if it's passed yet, but if you don't notify of a data breach within a certain amount of time, there's regulatory fines and jail time associated with it.
Yeah, but so that kind of reminds me of like law. I've never been a lawyer. Right?
I am not a lawyer.
So
I'm so far from a lawyer.
This is based on what I've seen on TV and movies, right? But I know people that are lawyers, and I've paid a few lawyers for some stuff, and usually they give you guidance based on precedent, right? And they a lot of times will look back at a case and say, oh, and they'll reference a case and the outcome of that case and use that as kind of like not necessarily justification, but kind of like a backbone to an argument. So when you talk about New York, state of New York, and things that they are either doing or passing or will be, the first thing that I think of is how that sets precedent, right? For everything to just roll downhill for all the other states, right? So my question there is, do people or are people in security more likely to get out of it as soon as multiple precedents are set by a governing body or like state legislature? Because
I think leadership has more exposure. So cybersecurity leadership and business leadership, right? Like even up to the CIO and the CEO and the, if you have a chief risk officer, right? There are real ramifications, just like if you're, a CFO and you're cooking the books, right? The SEC is going to come knocking on your door if you're publicly traded. Enron is a great example, right? Like Enron doesn't exist anymore because of what they were doing, because of, the regulatory requirement there. Security is having its, sophomore year or whatever you want to call it, right? Where it's, people are really taking a look at this data, these breaches, what the impact is to an individual versus a company, discovering what materiality is to each individual company. So I would say that leadership probably has a larger impact, where maybe CISOs aren't going to be a DPO, the data privacy officer, or on the hook for the business side of what they were originally scoped in for, which was to be kind of that throat to choke if there was a data breach or an incident. You're basically just signing up to be the punching bag in some of those scenarios, right? So I would say that those regulatory and the breadth of them is pulling people all over. We've got 50 GDPRs now.
Really?
I mean, that's hyperbolic, but like so many states now have different privacy or breach notification requirements that it's literally like, okay, well, now I had a data breach and it impacted 37 states. Well, now I've got to go look at 37. Okay, well, I have to notify the Attorney General in California in 72 hours. I got to notify the governor of Texas in 72 hours after notification. I have to. So there's all these like little whack-a-mole things you have to do, and it's hard to keep up. So like I think there is some federal regulation out there that's supposedly being looked at. I don't know where it's at in like reality, but there's been a few bills proposed around kind of codifying into like a U.S. Whether it be like a GDPR for privacy or more cybersecurity notification, data breaches, stuff like that, to centralize things. I think that's you've got a heavy pressure on individuals to be compliant and real ramifications of jail or significant fines. And then you have a fracturing of what you have to do to be compliant with those, right? And it's whack-a-mole deciding which one you focus on, and then they change or they add, and I think it's really causing some problems.
So is that job security?
It is if you can fight through it, right? Like I think that there's going to be companies that understand or leaders that can articulate that problem, and then people are going, oh, I get it. Yeah, it sucks. You gotta kind of figure this out. Or hey, let's get some lawyers involved, or get some time. Oh yeah, you do need D&O insurance, right? Like director and officer insurance to cover if you as in look at SolarWinds and Uber, right? Like there were real fines and potential jail time associated with those. I think those are still to your point precedent, right? We're setting that precedent right now. There's not a lot of precedent around that from a legal and compliance perspective. So those are going to change significantly, and there's lots of opportunity in the churn. Just like being at a startup, right? Like there's always opportunity when things are in flux. Yeah. But at some point they're going to solidify, and you might land on the wrong side of that decision, and you may not want to be a CISO anymore.
Yeah. No, I think when you describe it and like the precedent, in my mind, what I went to was how a lot of organizations make decisions or legislative entities, right, will make decisions or rulings, or I guess judicial makes their rulings. And when I think of bills and laws and things that get passed, there's a lot of things out there that affect people that when you think of our system, we elect people to make not decisions, but to represent.
Yeah.
Right. They represent our beliefs or what we as a people, vote people in. They make decisions based on their values, but they, in a way, fundamentally represent our beliefs. Yep. Or in most ways, a handful of them. You pick them as you go, right? But what I think about is a lot of times the House and the Senate will put bills in place that will affect a great number of people, but the people making those decisions aren't actually affected in a lot of ways.
Yeah, or they don't, a lot of times
they don't understand it.
Just voting blocks or whatever.
So when I think about it, I think of like a sales organization might put something in place, but they won't talk to the sellers, right? They'll make decisions based on information that they have, but not necessarily get the input from a salesperson or engineering maybe or marketing. there's different like facets to a business that will make a decision, but they may not actually include the person that becomes affected.
Mm-hmm.
So one question that I was thinking about when you had mentioned precedent being set and like with SolarWinds and Uber is the people that are making or potentially putting these laws into, or bills to be passed, they're not security experts.
Yeah, I would say I would hope that they get some feedback from experts, but there's I think offices, that like they're not experts on transportation, so they'll have the transportation industry, provide input and feedback, and lobbyists, right? I'm sure
sure.
are definitely in that space. I I don't propose being able to understand or fix government, right? Like there's a lot of nuance there that even just one company can't solve, much less 50 states and the federal government and state governments. So I definitely know it's a big complicated problem, and that's why each individual state is kind of doing their own thing.
Mm-hmm.
It's in the vacuum of the federal government potentially doing something. To your point, that may be way overbearing for what certain states want versus maybe California wants it very restrictive, but Texas wants it free and open. Right? There's
Of course,
that underpinning of our culture, right?
Yeah, yeah, and I think the thing that I think about when we talk about this is like you can't necessarily apply catch all
Nope.
because that misses a lot, right? Like even
But then it goes back to we have speed limits. Yeah, maybe there's different speed limits for different roads, but at least we can all agree that there needs to be speed limits. There's going to be people that disagree with that, right?
yeah,
But there's a saying like, okay, this is the bell curve. Here's the middle of the road. Maybe it's not XYZ, but we at least need to have like reporting of breaches to a central location
yeah,
for national security, right? Like, because the cybersecurity is a big space, and it's a new zone of geopolitical unrest too, right?
mm-hmm.
It's a lot easier to hack a business than it is to drop a bomb in some scenarios, and sometimes you can get a lot more out of hacking, a water plant than it is. It's a whole new world in that space, and the U.S. is, I feel, still significantly behind some of the larger threat actors out there. There are mandated indoctrination program. I mean, indoctrination isn't a great word, but like there are nation state level programs to produce cybersecurity talent.
Mm.
You can't compete with that.
No,
with our mindset.
Yeah, because here, if you do that, you're going to jail, right? And this is something that Mike Bonner and I talked about, where he was saying every other country outside of the U.S., criminals are like welcome.
Yeah,
and it's like, what does your dad do?
I mean, I would say criminal. I mean, yeah, absolutely, there's criminals, but a lot of times it's people that have interest, but their interests lie in a place that may be, seen as, like you said, a criminality or they're not being focused towards the good.
Yeah,
it's more focused on the bad, right?
But that kind of reminds me of just human nature.
Yeah,
it's like you take advantage of a situation, right? Like if every time you traveled out of country and you went to the exchange office, and I don't know what they call it, but I think it's wherever you go to change $1,
yeah.
and you gave them $1 and they gave you €5. The first time you're like, oh, you made a mistake. Next time you might bring $10 with you, and then you get €50, right? And it's like, okay. I mean,
yeah.
Like I am incentivized, like the money world revolves around money in some capacity or not. Like
there's a meme that floats around every once in a while, and it's like the like the salary levels in cybersecurity, and it's like SOC analysts, policy writer, blue team, red team, security engineering, security architect, GRC director, CISO, hacker.
Like it's like a huge
Yeah,
spike,
yeah.
right?
It's like, woo!
Yeah, it goes up like an exponential curve,
Yeah,
right? Just
it's like a 10x.
it just hits. But I think in general, like people will make decisions based off their own financial interest, right?
A lot of
And
people will, absolutely.
so I mean that's like a given. Like
But even like just thinking of it from a geopolitical perspective, in my opinion, like let's just take China for example. Like they are very focused on building cyber talent. They have tracks where people can just, start in school, learn, grow, and then they have a job straight out working for the government
mhm.
or, a third party. I'm not saying it's specifically the Chinese government doing it, but there are programs that are focused on it. And then let's just say 1% of their new trainees roll in. That's hundreds of millions of new people that are potentially on the internet collecting intelligence. And it doesn't need to be nefarious. It can be OSINT. It can be, it can be collecting. Just think if Palo Alto could have 100 million engineers out there scraping data for Code 43, right? Like all their intelligence gathering. Like you can't compete with that. Like there's no way. The order of magnitude is so much. Whereas the U.S. is very compartmentalized and individuals and every little company and it's yeah, you can have individuals that are amazing, but you could have 100 million mediocre people and you're going to find a lot more intelligence than if you have one of the best intelligence collectors in the world working. Like it's just things you can't compete against.
Yeah, it's almost like a marketplace,
Yeah,
right? Like, or when maybe marketplace isn't the right word, but when I think of it, I think of a GoFundMe,
yeah,
crowdsourcing, right? You can knock on doors all day and like ask for a donation.
yeah,
You might get lucky, and you might get someone that gives you $1,000,
yeah.
but you put it on GoFundMe, and whatever reason that you have it there, people relate to it or they want to contribute. They might do $5, but you could probably get at least a few hundred people to donate to it, and a few hundred people donating a few bucks.
You ask one person for $1 million or 1 million people for $1. What
Yeah,
are you going to be more successful at?
exactly.
The numbers game. And then that's the flip side of cybersecurity too. Is as a company, we have to be right 100% of the time. Hacker has to be right one time.
Yeah, it's like they just have to hit the lottery one time, right?
Yep.
It kind of reminds me of, and so I didn't know this exists prior. I mean, I knew it was around because you hear enough of it, but it's called pig butchering, right? Familiar with it or no?
Mm-mm.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
I get to tell you something.
Yeah, I can learn something new.
So pig butchering refers to essentially like the Tinder swindler. Familiar with that? You don't know about the Tinder swindler?
I'm
Okay.
like catfishing or whatever.
So the Tinder swindler was actually a guy. I don't know where he's from. He's a guy, and he would go on Tinder, and he would message women, right? And it was probably a good-looking guy, probably way better looking than me, right? If I remember correctly, I'm sure, right? It's not that
You don't have his picture?
it's not very hard, right, to beat me. But it's like so he would go on there and he would message these women and he would get to know them. And it was really him. Like it was actually him. And eventually he would ask them for money. And they would send him money. And then, mysteriously he's locked up somewhere, he can't get access to his bank account, and he would do all these things or say all these things, and he would ask for 5K, 10K, 20K. Oh, I need to travel, my passport, just whatever excuse he could have. A grifter, right? And so he would get all this money. And eventually they would realize that while he was real, he wasn't actually interested in a relationship, right? So the same thing, essentially, is called pig butchering, is where threat actors that are, whoever they are, male, female, whoever, it doesn't matter, will create an account that will target specific people for money, right? And it kind of, my understanding is it kind of falls in line with like BEC, the category of BEC, which is like part of it.
There's extortion. There's so many paths to it, right? Like today.
So, but pig butchering specifically, I think and I might be wrong. I had to ask Mike Bonner about this, but or I could just Google it. Is I think it refers to men being approached by women and then being sending money. So it's kind of like catfishing, but with money involved.
Yeah.
And I had never heard of that before, but I knew it existed.
Yeah.
So a Tinder swindler is essentially the same thing,
Yeah.
but it happens, right? And I think it goes back to human nature. If someone is lonely and they're just looking for companionship, they might be willing to send a few $100 to someone that they've never actually met.
I mean, social engineering is a thing for a reason, right? Like it is. Physical access is a nightmare, and that's where social engineering comes in. That's where cyber extortion, BEC. We always think about the $20 million, whatever, but sometimes they just need access, and a thumb drive, because they're not looking for to take out your company. They're just looking to get some information and move on. And a lot of times that's so nuanced you can't see that unless you have a very mature, dialed in kind of security program, and it's just thumb drives.
Oh, like in the parking lot.
Yeah. Oh, what's that? Click, or you forget. Someone sets it in the bathroom. And oh, let's see what that. And you plug it in, and you don't see anything, but all of a sudden they've done 100,000 commands
in like 5
behind
seconds.
the scenes without you seeing anything. And it doesn't do anything. And you okay, you unplug it and whatever. But now it's resident. It's loaded a rat. It's monitoring your keystrokes. And everything's on the internet nowadays. So it's just this one little trick. Maybe it's exfiltrated using DNS obfuscation, where the DNS entry is fake, but the DNS name is like a base 64 encoded password, and it's a username and password base 64 encoded, and it's something.google.com, and it pings, and you don't even need to write anything. It's literally the web server fails. Right? It's in there, but that's in your log file now. They go look at the log file. They find that DNS entry. They decrypt the base 64 encoding. They got a username and password to your environment, and there's no way to track that. It's very nuanced.
Nothing about that sounds hypothetical.
I mean, Shannon entropy is a thing for a reason, right? Like.
That's the first time I've heard that described like that. Yeah, it just sounds.
But like that's like the cool, fun. 90% of cybersecurity is like, do your job, don't be stupid. Here's the rules.
Yeah.
Right. But I think a lot of people get into cybersecurity for the movie style hacking and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I have a few hoodies at my house. I'm not really good at computer stuff, but I mean, I could imagine like the.
But even what you just said. You could do social engineering. You can talk to other human beings. Like you can write. You don't have to be like a hacker or like a Python programmer to be a good cybersecurity analyst. Like there's so many. Cybersecurity is such a nuanced. Keep bumping. Such like a nuanced space that it's really like a microcosm of a company or even just IT. In a little bubble, right? Like there's so many things that you can do in there to be successful.
The word that comes to mind is eclectic.
It can be. It's the island of lost or misfit toys. We'll use a holiday analogy, right?
Is that how you, in your experience, have kind of seen
I mean, security is a mindset. No matter what you do, whether it's cyber or legal or roads, right? Like it's a mindset, and a lot of times it's thinking from a negative space, right? Like what would happen if something bad happened?
Yeah.
Right. So that's where you get a lot of the mentality. Not everybody can think like that. They want to live in a positive space.
Yeah, there's I've done a couple of things where I just don't even pay attention. Don't even pay attention. Yep. My wife's like, "Did you do taxes?" I'm like, I think we filed something. I don't know. I paid someone a bunch of money to do something. I don't know what they did.
But people are CPAs because they love doing people's taxes.
Yeah.
Right. Like everybody does that. So that's what's fun about cybersecurity is you can find skill sets anywhere. It's more about interest and desire and being willing to not overlook the details a lot of times.
Yeah, and I think that might even kind of get into another topic where it's like the job market,
Mm.
right? There's a high supply, and
So I'm going to challenge on that one. There's been a lot of weird research out there around fake jobs.
oh
And I
yeah,
don't know if you've dug into it much, but it it seems insane to me that a company would waste time. I mean, and some of it is maybe recruiters justifying their role, or HR departments, or it's just shopping, right? It could be just resume farming. And I mean, honestly, looking at it from a cybersecurity lens, right? Like it could be people getting threat intel about individuals. Like I'm gonna post a fake job posting for the most amazing CISO opportunity in the world, but it's a secret. I can't tell you who it is. Send me your resume. What's on your resume? Phone number, email, full name, all the job history, certifications, education, right? Like it's a gold mine for intelligence gathering.
yeah. No, I haven't applied for a job in 10 years, so I guess I'm a little bit out of the market. At least 10 years.
Yeah.
So as far as like, so I haven't interviewed for a role in 10 years. Right, so I'm dusty. I'm worse than like grandma's attic type dust. So I guess I don't know specifically. Like I haven't had a situation where I apply for something and then get ghosted or find out that nothing exists.
Yeah.
But I do know a lot of people that say that. And I don't really know what the situation is, but so are you saying that it's possible that they're just collecting data
Yeah.
for the use of what would be the reasoning other than just farming?
It could be farming. It could be, you know, uh, job justification. Some of the anecdotal evidence is that companies will use it as an excuse to um, hire outside the U.S., right? To be able to trigger international employees because it's a lower cost index out there, um, or it just could be keeping the machine going so that the company that oh well, look, we've interviewed 37 people. It's just a really hard job to fill, and justifying your existence. Kind of, I don't propose to have any clue, but
Okay.
it's weird, right? Like, and we so there's this number in cybersecurity. There's 300,000 open jobs. Like, there's been 300,000 jobs since I worked 3 jobs ago, right? Like in 2016. Like, there there needs to be like some reality to that. Like it feels like it's just been the same consistent gap, and we need more cyber talent, and we need this. And then when I go into the market, like I've hired people on my team, I find amazing talent, and I get like 300 resumes.
Really?
Like I will literally post a role for 3 4 days, and I will have over 300 applicants. Of the 300, 100 could literally do the job.
Okay.
So you can't tell me that there's a talent shortage if I'm still getting that many resumes in 2024.
There's just a lot of unhappy people, but only a third of them.
So then why are they unhappy then? Like, if the jobs they're in are so bad, like, why is there such a shortage?
I don't know.
I'm getting 300 people to apply for my job,
Mhm.
like, and it's not like this amazing, $500,000 a year in travel gig or whatever. I really think that either something's inflated, something just doesn't smell right, in my opinion. It feel and again, zero evidence, just anecdotal, like my job postings. Back when I got laid off from a startup, and just going out in the industry and trying to apply for roles, like a lot of them didn't feel real.
Really?
Yeah, this was 2024. No, 2020. No, this is 2024. Sorry, 2022.
Okay.
I got laid off from a startup. It was a interesting role. Like, I was super excited about it. It was in AI.
Oh no.
Yeah, but
AI
they got
things.
caught. They were going Series D, but they had to spend all their Series C money, and then the economy changed, and the VCs were like, "Oh, just kidding. We don't have any more money for you." So They had to restructure the company. So when I was on the job market, like there were a lot of great opportunities. And again, like I was like, hey, it's like the worst problem I'm gonna have is the 5 minutes that I have to spend deciding which job I want to apply to, right?
Okay.
Because there's so many opportunities. You hear about all these amazing. It was, it took, and it was. I did not. I got 2 interviews. I applied for probably 200 jobs.
Wait, you got a 1% success rate?
2 interviews. One was the company that I was at before. So I had personal connections and they went to bat for me. And the other one was the role I'm in today because the individual that had worked for me at a prior company was leaving. He was retiring and he was like, hey, you should talk to this lot guy. So they weren't even jobs that I applied for.
Wow. Oh,
So, yeah.
so make sure I understand this. You applied for 200 roles.
Yep.
Of those, how many would you say were...
Zero. I got zero response.
Well, you got zero response, but how many of them were CISOs?
None.
Oh, none of them were a
None.
CISO role?
No.
Oh.
They were all director level roles.
So you applied for... Okay, so you applied for Director of Security.
Director of Security, Director IT, pre-sales role, like there was...
So everything within the scope of what you've done in the past, like
Yep.
10, 15 years.
Yep.
You could be a really high staff engineer, architect,
Yep.
right? So 200 roles, not specific to CISO.
No.
Right? Okay, it's specific to director. And you essentially got zero calls back.
Yep.
You had zero interviews, zero calls. Out of 200, out of 200 applications, the only things that actually panned out were, in fact,
Direct.
relationships with the people.
Yep.
The one was someone that you worked with, right? And the other one was someone that knew of you.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing then is, if anyone that's interested in getting a role, you just can't apply.
You have to apply.
Well, you have to apply,
But you
have to
have some kind of connection, it feels like, anymore.
Yeah, because, well, like I said, it's been like 10 years. And even when I applied at the last place, it was more so like a phone call conversation, and someone that I knew the other person that was hiring. And I mean, honestly, like, actually, I won't say that. We'll just say that I got the job, right? And it was a sales role, right? So a lot of upside in sales, but there's just a broad population or an audience that they source from, right?
Yep.
We'll leave it at that. And so there's that, and you can get that job, but there is on LinkedIn now, there is like the easy apply button where you just have it and you just click a button and
Dozens of those.
and it applies for you, right?
But look at how many people have applied for those. Probably like
Thousands.
1,000+ people.
Yeah.
Like nobody's gonna look at 1,000 resumes.
No. So what I find interesting then is like when you were on the sales side, did you ever have to do like any prospecting?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So it was cold calls,
Yeah.
emails,
Yeah.
blasting, spam blasting,
Going out to conferences,
Mhm.
pulling people in.
But
Yeah.
but I'm sure there's one story that you have somewhere where you did something that was out of the norm, and it actually worked out for you. Do you have anything like that where maybe you dropped off something at the office or said something specific in an email that got someone's attention?
I mean, for me, being an engineer, it was more about speaking to the truth of the capability of the product that I was selling or
Mhm.
solution. So being more of a pre-sales engineer, you're generally more liked, I guess, for lack of a better term, right? Like they want to talk to the engineer, they don't want to talk to the salesperson.
Yeah, we could talk on that.
Right? Right?
Well, actually, so maybe this is a good time. I always ask this question, and I'm gonna start out with, I have to set what you would consider a boundary condition, right? From the engineering role, boundary condition is the answer that you can say is yes or no. It has to be the first thing that comes to mind, and you can't think of anyone or anything specific. It's just yes, no. Are you ready for the question?
I'm ready.
Okay. Do you trust salespeople?
Yes.
No, you can't say that. You looked up and to the left, and according to my experience in TV, that's a lie. Why did you say yes?
I have salespeople that I trust.
Okay, so that's where I have to qualify this is because that's why I said you can't think of anyone specific.
You can't tell me what to do in my brain.
I'm up there.
All right. So then, if you gave me a vacuum, nobody trusts salespeople. We've been ingrained as a culture to not trust salespeopeople. We've been inundated with the sleazy car salesman or the vacuum salesman, the foot in the door, right? Like that build, just like cybersecurity is the dark, evil hacker in the back room, with ill intent. The salesperson is just someone there to say anything to get a dollar out of your pocket.
Yeah, the goal is to separate you from your money,
Yeah.
right? So everyone that I've asked that question, everyone says no. So you're actually technically the first person that says yes, but the reason you said yes is because you thought of people that you trust. And everyone has a handful of people that they trust, right?
I have to couch everything in reality. I can't do hypotheticals.
Okay. Well, I like to ask it because
and so I gave you why it's a no.
yeah.
Right. I feel that culturally it is a no matter what. If you frame it with those many caveats, it's a no.
Yeah, and then because of that, it makes sales so much harder.
Anytime a salesperson approaches me, it starts from a point of distrust.
Really?
Yeah.
So how do you and maybe I'm just doing it for all the sales my sales brothers and sisters.
I've been on both sides of the fence, so
So like I'm sure you work with someone that you trust that you didn't at one point, right? Because like you said, it starts with
no.
No?
Like that's I think and maybe it's a leadership thing. Look at executive leaders when they step into a C role.
Okay.
90% of that role is about being able to trust your team and that they will execute your vision and your strategy. If you can't trust even if they're not, in coming up through the ranks, you always have like, oh, well, they got that role because they know blah, 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 or they're so-and-so's friend, or, looking at it from a C level now, I can see how you could get to that mindset because when you're at the top of, even if it's just the top of IT, like the CIO or the chief digital officer or, whatever your role is, it's all about being able to communicate your vision and your direction, your intent, and have it executed.
Yeah.
Not is it executed to the perfect degree, to the best of the best, to, whatever level, can it be executed? Because a lot of times, if you can execute it, it's going to be good enough. And you can always iterate and enhance. But if you get into an org where you're the leader and the people beneath you are not working with you, but maybe they're working against you or they're working on their own thing and they're not within the intent that you've expressed, that causes friction, that causes disinterest, that causes disconnection, and that causes failure. So, long story short, back to your comment, in security, all you have is trust. Because you are generally that tip of the spear, or at least in our minds, right? Like we are the veil to prevent the darkness from coming into your company, right? Like the whatever.
You're like the moat
Yeah,
around the castle.
Yeah, I mean, even that doesn't work anymore. Like
No.
your four walls are gone. The castles have been blown to bits, right? Like they're already in your walls. So trust is like literally the only thing you can have in that scenario. And again, I feel it still comes from like a military perspective of, do you trust the person to your right and to your left, in the foxhole, right? If you can't, then you got problems because you're worried about them, not what your focus is supposed to be. So in cybersecurity, if you have a vendor come in and they, you can start from a neutral position of I want to trust this person, and that's generally how I am. I'm generally a positive person, so I want to trust, but I will verify. Right?
Okay.
But as soon as there is any inkling or any thing that leads to a distrustful conversation, even if it's like a simple white lie, right? Like, okay, if it's that easy for them to do this, you kind of just go to the nth degree, and there's 1,000 other people that can sell me a widget, right? But if someone can understand my problem, my pain, be able to articulate a strategy that's going to help me,
Mm-hmm.
not only in my career, but also personally, and deliver on my need, right? That's a trust. That's somewhere where you start to build that trust relationship.
Yeah.
Now, if they blow it up and they mess something up, or they lie to you, or they don't do what they say they can do, that's a one-time shot and you're done. At least in my space, like cybersecurity, I feel most cybersecurity leaders like that. Probably most technology leaders are that, right? But
Yeah, I think because, depending on the company you work at and how large it is, there's a lot of money to be spent,
yeah,
which means there's a lot of money to be made, right? And so you kind of have to, I guess, balance those, or with people that you trust. Which, I mean, it makes sense. It's like you work with people that what is it? People know, like, and trust.
mm-hmm.
So you have to know of them, right? If you don't even know who they are, like I think you said on LinkedIn, you only accept people that you've actually met, which technically you're a second degree connection. So like when I went to go get your picture to put it on the screen as like for the file
Yep.
folder with your stuff, couldn't go to LinkedIn.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I guess I don't know them. So technically I fall in that category. But so you have to know of them, right? You have to like them, because if you know them and they're kind of like an asshole, and
I mean,
right,
some assholes get stuff done. I'm not, like
they do. But it's part of the
Yeah.
like the trifecta, and then you have to trust them, right? So it's like trust comes on the tail end of that phrase specifically. I don't think it's like trust, like, and know. It's know is like the acknowledgement that they exist,
Yep.
and then once you know that they exist, your personal opinion. How do you feel about it? And then outside of your emotional attachment, can you actually trust them,
Yeah.
right? So it's kind of like this like rabbit hole of, as you go down, like at the very bottom, the most important foundation is the trust.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Like
like
your Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Like that's water and shelter, right?
yeah, it's the most essential.
Yeah.
Right. Without it, like, it's kind of like air. Right. Without air, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Can't breathe. So I always like to ask that question because it kind of helps me understand just people in general and what they think. Right. Coming from like a sales world, like for me personally,
Yeah.
I couldn't tell you how many times people would just like not respond, say hi, because, and this probably happens way more often than it should, but like you'll connect with someone on LinkedIn, and then 2 days later, almost like exactly so many hours, there is a tool that they bought that sends a message and says, hey, we recently connected, and it's like, I don't even know who you are, right? And then like 3 days after
you'd
that,
be a great fit for you'd be a great fit for this role if you are a network architect. Like, oh, what? Like how many of those do you get a week?
yeah, no, I don't get those specifically, but there's a lot of, oh, hey, you could tell it's AI.
Yeah.
We'll sprinkle AI in this and loosely use it, where they'll message you and then add something and scrape something from your website. Just like
Yeah.
there's, like we talked about earlier, that there's companies that people pay a lot of money to do that for
Yeah.
them. So at scale, they can just like spam cannon you,
Yeah.
and then find out that there was no personalization. It was highly automated.
Have
right?
you ever moved forward on a cold email? Like, have you ever gotten that email and be like, I need to talk to this person?
No.
Yeah.
It just don't work.
Yeah.
It just doesn't like. So I don't understand where companies spend all this money on collecting their users' information, because it's like I might get an email from Bath and Body Works because I have one email that I use for all that stuff, it's kind of just like my trash email,
Yeah.
but I know I can log into it. I have it on my phone. And a lot of times it's really annoying because you want to do something like, we needed your email and we have to verify that it's real. It's like, all right, here, take my trash.
Yeah.
Right? Here, let me give you this trashy
Yep.
email where everyone else goes.
It's unlimited.
It's what?
It's unlimited.
It is.
Whatever you store, whatever you want.
You can put whatever you want in there. And then, everything goes to there. And then, like, the stuff that's important goes to a specific one. And one that's specific to, like, money and things like that goes into, like, another one. So it's like this hierarchy of emails, right? Where if you get into the...
All your little plus emails.
Yeah, exactly. So I've never responded to a cold email that I can think of where I was like, oh, this is good. But it's also like the world of sales is just around a bunch of cold calls where there's data brokers that will sell your info, right? I could have probably found your number through access to tools that I have. And I'm sure there's a lot of people that either get that access for free, pay for it with credits, or have a company that pays for it and they spend a lot of money to do that.
Yep.
So you get phone calls all day long. And I always just find it interesting to hear, from the desired, right, is what I'll say, is people that want or that are wanted by others, like in the sales world, like what it's like, because it just seems like a struggle.
If we spend as much money and time and effort on cybersecurity as we did on intelligence collection and cold calls, like, can you imagine? No, it's just funny to think about. But I think that, like any sales, it's nuanced to the nth degree. Like it's all, just like the artificial, quarterly sales motion. Oh, end of quarter, best pricing. End of year, even better pricing. Like
that's true.
It's true to a point, but so it's also predicated on generally publicly traded companies, because they're driving revenue, and revenue is driven quarterly. Like you can't have. I was reading an article just recently. Like could Bell Labs exist? They invented Unix, email, the internet, fiber optics, telephone, cellular. Like all these things that you're just like transformative capabilities, but the time return for those, like, oh, what was it? It was insane to me. And it was just like, I think it was just like something stupid, like fiber optics. Like, what do you think the R&D cycle is to invent fiber optics?
Billions.
Well, no, like the time.
Years?
It was like 25 years to make it viable.
Yeah.
Like, what company, publicly traded company, is going to spend 25 years on crypto? Or, like, even look at, like, they're all like think tanks or government, and, but the publicly traded cycle, I think, is feeding a lot of these, like, artificial timelines. It's killing sales motions, in my opinion, because salespeople can't build relationships anymore because there's such a drive to close.
Yeah.
And anytime a customer is like, hey, you know what, Fern, like I got this opportunity, I don't know where it's at, and you'd be like, okay, well, I'm gonna put that in my CRM. VP, where's this deal? You gotta close it next month.
You gotta know, like.
But I mean, that's a game, right? Like why is there a game?
It's motivated by the interest of the organization selling.
Yeah.
It's always self-motivated, right? And
but as a salesperson, it's all artificial. I don't have that timeline as a customer. Hey, you're going to get me good pricing. Cool. That's awesome. I want that pricing. But I got all these other things I got to figure out. Like maybe I'm not even in my budget cycle. Like you got to wait till my fiscal kick over. Oh, sorry, pricing's gone.
Yeah.
Like there's these artificial games that we have to play. And then like the VPs are there just to grind on you and close deals. By that time, you said is this gonna come in? Oh, no? Yes? No? Is it you committed? Are you committed? Like it's just like it just creates this pressure. And then I feel that also then feels the erosion of that trust you're trying to build with your customer. Because now you have pressure to pressure, good salespeople figure it out. I totally get that. But like people up and coming, there's a difference now, I think, in younger salespeople generally the people that have it figured out are more mature, or they've been in the cycle long enough to get, the rough stone gets smoothed out, with the water, right?
Yeah. Skipping stone now.
Yeah, but I don't know, just anecdotally, like I feel that it's creating this artificial pressure, and that in turn is creating a less trustworthy relationship between buyer and seller in some scenarios.
Yeah, I think forecast calls are the worst kind of calls to be on.
Have you ever been to a QBR that was positive and uplifting, or was it like, when are you going to close this deal?
So QBRs. So when you say QBRs, so here's the thing. When I was working at a place that had them, they were supposed to be for clients, where you do a QBR for a client.
Oh, yeah, I'm talking about like your internal, like maybe you have a different name for them, like kind of like like a sales kickoff, but like you do the quarterly kind of like, here's my deal that I'm working this quarter and where it's at and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so here's my take on those is, when I started in sales, there was a need for metrics, phone calls, contacts, touches, whatever, right? And I never followed the rules. I was always the person that there were people that were making 100 phone calls, and then there was me that might have had 8 calls. And on paper, it looks terrible.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, this guy, what's he doing all day?
But were those 8 calls qualified?
Well,
versus 100 unqualified?
Yeah. So you would look at the conversation, and like the talk time, it was another metric that would be captured, and I would easily have 1.5 to 2.5 hours a day. Whereas the people that were making 100 calls didn't have that, right? And a lot of it could have been voicemails.
Yeah.
So you make 100 calls and you leave 1 minute voicemails or a lot of times you could, realistically, you could fake it, right? You could just sit on hold. You call the same number 5 times.
And my widget.
Yeah, and just wait. The recording software,
Yeah.
Calabria or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I think at the time.
Going through the motions.
Yeah, it just collects it and it looks good. On paper, one person's making a fraction of the calls, 10%. The other person's making what they're doing, but they're getting nowhere, right? And that was my approach from the onset. So whenever there were like these meetings or like QBRs, I honestly didn't really care, because it's like, for what?
Yeah.
Like, I'm working on stuff and it'll close when it closes, and that is what it is. And a lot of times you'll get like, well, we need this by this time and we need this by this date because we've committed it. It's like, okay, well, what do you want me to do about that? Like, so there were a lot of times I'd be working on stuff that people didn't know about.
Yeah.
Because like you said, the minute someone finds out about it, it's like, well, when can we get that?
Yeah.
Well, hey, when what do we got to do to close this? It's like, I don't know, man. Like, we're working on some other stuff. Like, we're waiting on this answer. It's like, it's not just here's this, give me that. There's a process to it. So there were a lot of times where, I would just like show up on a Monday, or I'd get an email on a Friday, and it would be a purchase order. Easily it could be 7 figures, right? And this happened a number of times.
We didn't forecast this. This came out.
Exactly. Like, oh no, it was something I was working on, but you kind of learn that like the sandbag is your best friend, because then you don't have to deal with. My favorite was always like partner reps that weren't the actual rep, but they're more so like within the channel.
Yeah, like an overlay or.
Yeah, and they're just like calling you every day. Hey, what can I do to help you close this deal? And it's like, and the worst is like, when you submit for pricing, then it's obvious like they know about it, right?
And it's in there.
Yeah, it's in their system, and then what you hope is like their people don't talk to your boss, because then your boss is going to find out what you're working on. And then all of a sudden it's like, hey, what is this? Right? Like,
we don't have deal reg.
Yeah, exactly. Right. What are you doing, you idiot? So it's, I never really had, I had a great experience, right? Sales is fun. What I also understand is that sales isn't necessarily what people make it out to be.
Yeah.
Sales is more so like just being another person and talking to people and like, and helping them.
It's a Groundhog Day element to it.
Yeah.
Where it's like you have to kind of like repeat the same story and conversation, but that's where you build those trust relationships, right?
Yeah, and it takes years. I mean, there's one guy I still talk to him. I haven't talked to him in probably a few weeks, but before we ever met, and I like telling the story because I thought he was fake. So like catfish that we talked about earlier, there is a guy, and everyone, when I would reach out to someone, they'd talk to Mike. like, who's Mike? So I ended up finding Mike. Find him online. You know, he was from Michigan. I was like, oh, me too, right? Because I was born in Michigan. And eventually message him, and he never responded. I was like, Mike isn't real. Mike isn't even a real person. And now, and then there was one thing, it was like a Cisco SmartNet thing came up. And he was the person in charge of their UCS for their database and their infrastructure, right? He was over infrastructure as a whole. But I thought he was just made up, you know. Turns out he wasn't.
He's their black hole. They just send everybody to.
And, you know, we met for the first time. I sat down with him and I kind of explained like how this whole thing works, how the cogs turn.
Yep.
And then the things that I talked to him about, the things that I showed him, I think gave him perspective that he had never seen before from someone in sales.
Yeah.
Because even to this day, he's like, yeah, like the things that you told me and the things that I've learned from you, I haven't got from anyone else.
That's a huge part of it, right? Is we're all people, and we all want to be better. I've never met anybody that wants to suck at their job. That's from my perspective. Like I've never met anybody that's like, I'm going to go to work today and just be the best or the worst CISO ever.
Just gonna be mediocre
right?
today.
Right? I mean, rest and vest. You know, there's always the fun anecdotes, but you know, at the end of the day, like even just like no one goes into work and is like, I'm going to click that phishing link, right? Like so, it's all about like thinking of them as humans. And in that scenario, you treated him like a human, not a number. And he saw you as a human, not just another sales drone.
Yeah.
Right? And that's where real value, I think, comes to play. Is when you can help, because you helped him understand maybe some of the nuances of like a sales motion or, you know, whatever you did to educate him. But that made him a better director, negotiator, you know, whatever he wanted to be as he you know, rose in his role or even in the role he was at. And it also made you a better salesperson because now you had, you know, a better understanding of the business and what was really going on at the, you know, on the floor in that business, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, you know, so I was in Texas for like 4 or 5 years before I moved back here, right? And so there was a storm in Texas that it was in January, February. Everything shut down. Like in San Antonio where we were at, there was no power.
Yeah.
So they closed the highways. You couldn't even hop on the highway. And I don't know if you've been to Texas, but Texas is just weird. Like compared to Arizona, like you think of like the grid of like the state. Texas is like a giant clock.
Yeah.
And to get to one place from one place to the other, you kind of have to go in towards the center of the circle and then hop on the highway that, you know, wraps around, right? But you couldn't even hop on the highway. And so there was no power. We didn't have the Tesla battery pack like the neighbor did. We had no electricity, right? So you couldn't really heat anything up. We had gas, so luckily we were able to cook, right? But everything in the fridge was toast because there was no power to keep it, you know, safe. So you can't eat any food. So we're stuck there in Texas, and it's like, man, like, what am I supposed to do? And at the time, I was working in the resale world, right? And Mike was I believe he was still a customer before he moved to his role, and he offered to drive out to Texas in his 4x4, 16-hour drive. And I remember this because I was like, wow. He offered to drive out to Texas in his 4x4 to pick me and my family up and take us somewhere else. And I was like, wait a second. Right? Like, he's willing to drive this entire distance for someone that's essentially his salesperson. Right?
Yeah.
And to me, that was like probably one of the coolest things. And so I try to play cards with him every now and then because he likes to play cards. The last time we tried to do it, I went to the wrong casino. I went to the one in Scottsdale, and he was like in a different one. So we haven't, and I have to message him and see like when we're gonna go again. But you know, I don't work with him.
Yeah.
Right. But I still talk to him all the time. He lives just down the street from me. I mean, I've been to his house.
It's the power of the relationship. I mean,
it's different, right? And I
you're
think
human.
Yeah, and I remember I was thinking about leaving my job, and I was in his house, in his living room, talking to him about it. And he was like probably one of the first people to know that I was in this predicament, right, in a situation where I was contemplating leaving. And, you know, that was, that was something that had happened. But the main thing that I remember is like, he went from someone that I thought was fake, right, to being willing to do something that no one would probably have done, right? So it's like what happened in the 3 or 4 or 5 years that we had worked together was he went from a complete stranger to being the only person that would have driven 16 miles to pick me up. And not just me, my wife and my kids. And I think that's probably like one of the most like rewarding parts about being in sales is that you're doing your job and you're working with people, helping them do theirs. But eventually, those two worlds kind of intersect with your personal, and then you actually make friends out of it, right? And then those friends end up being able to do things for you that like your actual friends wouldn't do. Like I had, well, this is gonna sound terrible, but I had family members that knew I was in Texas. They knew that we had 2 kids, and they were both under 8, right? They knew that we didn't have any power. I didn't get anyone offered to drive out there,
Yeah.
right? And it's like in a situation where family, whether they thought about it, everyone's busy, right? So I don't want to make the assumption that they knew and willingly neglected, like family, right?
Yeah. If you had reached out, they probably would have.
Yeah, maybe, right? And maybe that's the silver lining part of it. But to think that someone that's not family, that at one point started as a complete stranger that I thought wasn't even real, and then had we'll say gone to a point where when my family and I were stuck with nothing, he was willing to drive out there. It only became that only happened because of we'll say the relationship that we had built, right? And I think that's kind of where every company that I've seen always says, "Oh, be the trusted advisor." Well, it's like the worst marketing term ever. Like, no, don't be the trusted advisor. Just be the trusted person. Be the person that they trust enough to, share things about work or business or even personal life. And there's a lot of people that I've worked with over the years that I know where they live. And I've been to their house and I've met their wife and I met their kids. And now that I'm older, like when I first started, I was like early 20s. So no one wanted to talk to me. Like, but now I am as old or roughly the same age as a lot of people that are in leadership roles. And it's kind of nice because, if I say something that references like a 90s movie, they know it, and it just makes it a lot easier to talk to people. But at the end of the day, I think what really matters is, like you said, the trust part of it. Because without that, it doesn't really go anywhere.
Yep.
And, for security in general, that's kind of like the foundation of everything, right?
It is, yeah.
I don't know. I just think it's really hard to, because you understand the motives and incentives of everyone in any sales role. It's kind of like the default answer. And maybe it's not no for you, like you said, but maybe it's just like a neutral and you have to build on that.
Yeah.
So sales is a tough world. I don't recommend it for everyone. I think you have to be willing to put in the time to do sales, but you also have to spend the time to understand the people that you're working with, right? And that's what I like about, doing this is you get to hear all kinds of crazy stories. Like so this could be like, that they say when you do like when you're meeting new people, tell me 3 truths and a lie. I think the perfect one for you would be, I've applied for 200 roles and I got 0 callbacks.
Yeah.
Because who would believe that? I wouldn't.
I bet there's a lot of people out there that have very similar experiences.
I know, but to me it blows my mind to think that someone can apply for that many jobs and not have any traction.
Yeah.
But then what it goes back to is like, who do you know? And who do you know that can help you? So how you got into your current role was by way of knowing someone that knew someone.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that's like the only way or the main way that most people get into the role? Because I'll give you some perspective on that, right? So Lester, and he jokes about this too. His first role in security was CISO, right? And the reason that happened was because the outgoing CISO was leaving, retiring, or I think just
City of Mesa, right?
I think so, yeah. It definitely wasn't Maricopa.
Yeah.
But it was a prior role. It might have been like Queen Creek or something because he had a few different stints. But the manager that was there, he was the manager, I believe, and the CISO was preparing to leave, and he was, he enjoyed it and he kind of got into it. And then eventually, when that person was leaving, they said, "Hey, do you want to take the backpack and run with it?" Yeah, right. There's been other people that knew about a job posting, but they were invited to it. Almost, it wasn't like a publicly available listing, and then they found that job, right?
Do a short post or something like that.
Yeah, and like there's a lot of people that hear about these, but it almost seems like to get to that level, it's not necessarily like a posted job. Or am I wrong?
I would say for larger entities, it's generally farmed to a third party, right? They'll do like a national search, or they'll do, a headhunter type organ, like a Whit Kiefer or someone will go do that on behalf of the company, and then they'll bring top 5 candidates and then run them through the gauntlet. I think some of it is properly articulating the role. A lot of people post a CISO and they just want like a director of security, or they want an infrastructure guy to, manage their stuff.
Because the security is so complex. Like
So I truly feel that the best jobs are ones that you can go into knowing, someone there, right? Because you're gonna have a better understanding of the role, right? You're gonna have someone advocating for you. I think that goes for anything, even sales, right? Like that's just human nature, right? Like and in security, because it is such a sensitive area, it's hard to trust bringing in an outsider. So if you've already got, someone to vouch for that individual, I didn't start out as a CISO.
Yeah.
Where I worked my way up into it, but I built up that trust and, kind of created the need for the role. So with that, like anything, it's not always what you know, it's who you know. Unfortunately, that's the way humans interact and work and understand. 2 out of my jobs that I've had was so literally the first 2 jobs I had were because I knew someone.
Okay.
And then stepping out was, only 2 of my jobs were like cold calls, I guess, for lack of a better, where I applied and, I got a call from the recruiter.
Yeah.
So that's 70% of my roles pretty much are because I knew someone in the company, or at least had an introduction from someone that knew someone, kind of thing.
So the key takeaway is, for anyone that's looking, just don't apply. Or hang on, wait. Apply, but be present locally. Go to these events, right?
Yeah.
You have to meet people, right?
You have to meet people. You have to get attention too. And I think like maybe either speaking or clubs or meetups, even like I said, like I don't connect with anybody on LinkedIn unless I've met them. That's by nature of, I could probably look at my LinkedIn right now and I've probably got over 100 people in the last 2 weeks that have, I want to be your friend. I don't know who you are. Like, and it's 99% salespeople or BDR, business development.
So we're going to change that for me?
Maybe, I don't know, man.
Maybe.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Like, oh man, I can't even get a good picture of this guy. Like, whatever. But you sent me your number, so I'm gonna put that in the CRM.
Done and done.
And I'm gonna sell it to
I'm in the system.
Are you okay?
You probably just find it.
I'm gonna find a salesperson that wants his number, personal cell phone for $100.
$10 million.
Okay, not $100. $10 million.
$10 million.
It's worth that much. Okay. Nah, I never do that. $10 million would be pretty nice though, but the minute people know that I'm selling numbers, never get a number again. So you said something earlier that I wanted to go back to because you used to work at Micro H, right?
C-Store was purchased by Micro H.
Oh, okay. So in my mind,
custom storage. Yep.
I associate them to the same. So do you know Tim McCulloch?
No.
Okay. So I think he's technically their CTO right now.
Okay.
And I used to work with him when he was over at Nutanix. And then I think he went to Rubrik for a little bit as an SE manager, but he used to work in the healthcare field. I mean, Tim knows a lot of people. He's a really good guy and, works locally. He's been in the market for like 20 plus years. And so I was scrolling on LinkedIn. It was like a Saturday or a Sunday. Who does that, right? Saturday night LinkedIn scrolling. If that gives you any sense of,
It's either that or Instagram. Right?
Yeah, I don't have an Instagram, so it has to be LinkedIn. Because Facebook is for all the old people.
That's the only social media that I have is LinkedIn.
Okay, yeah, I don't really use Facebook except for a couple of things, but Facebook is kind of like the place you go if you just want to see random stuff, and it's usually like your parents, right? Your parents on there, or maybe family. So I'm in the same boat, like LinkedIn. So it's a Saturday night, we're popping off. We're getting crazy at my house, scrolling LinkedIn. I've probably got like a Coca-Cola next to me, crazy Saturday night. Probably the most boring Saturday night ever, right? And I see this article that he had posted, and it talked about, it was like a 3 or 4 page kind of like PowerPoint that was turned into like a, whatever they call it, a reel. So I clicked on it and I started reading it, and it talked about how businesses are, their main objectives for AI, right? And there were 3 or 4 topics, and one of them was business. I think it was advantage or like competition, to be able to say that you have something or have it work in a certain way where it elevates the business, right? I was like, okay, cool. But at the very bottom was data sovereignty, right? And I kind of read that as more so like having full control over the data that exists within these models. And earlier you had mentioned how AI is a DLP problem, right? So when I was reading this like little thing that he had posted, my first thought was, well, when you think about bring your own device to work, right? There was a big push because companies are spending millions of dollars, depending on their size, right? They're spending a lot of money on phones, and then their carrier plan for that phone, right? Yeah. International plans, it gets pretty crazy on cell phones that are owned by the business, right? And so then it's like, oh, you bring your own device, and you bring your own stuff, and we'll pay for the plan, right? Until some companies just gave away phones, and then it didn't matter anymore. But when you bring your own device, that turned into, well, now we have to protect it, right? So then you see like the Mass 360 and the Mobile Iron, I think was the name. And you see all these companies come up. Like you see the MDM space grow because there's this push for securing the bring your own device world, right? And then you take that a little bit further or down the line and you see cloud, right? And I written this up and posted it. And when it comes to cloud services, right, you see brokers like CASB, right? The rise of CASB, right, for secure access. And then you start seeing, Cisco buying up companies, and then like Palo offering it, and all these companies that have now like this CASB offering, and they even, make their own category, right, for Gartner. Yep. And then it's like everyone's remote. Everyone goes home, COVID, right? Now everyone's got like a MX at their house, or a Z series, or a Cisco, like a security router, right, for a few $100. So they're buying all these things. Executives are at home, they're VPNing in, right? But then you see the rise of secure access at the edge.
ZTNA.
Yeah, right? So it's kind of like introduce a product or a process and then have that turn into how do we wrap it with security, right? Because if BYOD was the MDM, cloud-based services kind of brought the rise of CASB, and then remote work kind of, we'll say, accelerated the ZTNA.
I think that sometimes it's the product needs to be at a maturity level to be adoptable.
Okay.
Because we had proxies for years, right? Like where you couldn't connect in, that's really what things like Zscaler and, there's a lot more to them. I'm way simplifying, but at the end of the day, it's VPNs couldn't scale anymore, right? So why not just say everything connecting is secure, right? So everything's tunneled, but like F5 had that, what, 20 plus years ago, right? With SSL VPN, and you would just tunnel in and you'd be on stuff. So and even like MDM, MAM, I think sometimes the technology got good enough to where the business said, I'm not spending any more money on phones.
Yeah.
Because this is good enough, right? Like, or vice versa, this is costing us a ton of money. We need a solution, so companies chased it, right? Like, so I don't think you can like say it's one way or the other. It's kind of chicken or the egg, in my opinion, because like you need a market to be able to sell to, but you also need a product that the people can adopt that's actually interesting to them to be able to buy. I feel that a lot of times the maturation of a product might be from a deployment perspective. There's that inflection point between like when the product costs what you want to spend on it and when you get the value out of it. And at that point is usually where you hit your good sales motion, right? Like when it's solving a problem and it's affordable enough that people, because we've had, SSL VPN forever, right? And you had edge routers and all kinds of crazy connectivity, and even Windows had the secure remote desktop back in like Windows.
Oh, the RDS.
Yeah,
the RDS servers.
Right, like
okay.
this is it's like making it easy enough that people understand it, but also making it affordable enough that it's meaningful to purchase at that point.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So maybe it's not necessarily chicken or the egg. I just find it interesting how there's always a pair.
Yeah.
And security seems to always be paired with the technology, right? And maybe that's more so where I was going is with a process improvement, you tend to find security paired with it.
Yeah. So there's another piece to that, and that's regulatory. And through that, cyber liability insurance is playing a big piece of it. Like, so insurance, like you basically, the FUD out there is like you can't have a security program without cyber liability insurance. There's third-party audits that require it. You're not going to pass. So they're kind of forcing like certificates, cyber liability insurance of a certain amount based upon your total revenue, et cetera. They in turn are now starting to say, well, these are the vendors that we trust.
Oh, they're like picking them.
Yes.
That seems very
and so, but then there's also like PCI. Have you read the new PCI standard?
The one that came out like 3 months ago?
Yeah.
I haven't. So I haven't. I've heard about it, but I don't know as much of it as some people that I know that are in that.
So just as an anecdote, they're explicit. So PCI has always been like, do your job, don't be stupid, right? Like it's a guideline to hit, and then you can be certified and all that stuff. But now they're starting to mandate specific technologies.
Wait, so like vendors that you have to buy?
But they're saying like you must have secure email gateway.
Oh, okay.
So you got to have Proofpoint, you got to have Mimecast, you got to have whatever, or Microsoft 365. Like they're not explicitly saying which technology, but they're saying you need this technology.
Okay.
Insurance providers are going one step further and saying, okay, here's our 5, email gateways we like. Here's our 2 firewall vendors we like. And they're like mandating, and if you can probably still say no, but your premiums go up.
So this is interesting. I've never heard about this. I've got all kinds of things like spinning around like in the hamster wheel right now.
Yeah. Not everybody's doing it, but I've seen it in a couple instances.
Well, the first thing that comes to mind is it kind of reminds me of Gartner, right? Where it becomes a pay to play, where it's like, are you in the top right? No. But I don't know if we want to buy your stuff.
I'm allegedly.
Right? Allegedly, right? I don't know enough. But, I've anecdotally, like I've heard stories from people where they talk about how, and so here, I guess, let me say this. I've never seen anyone pay any sort of money to have any work done or, whatever, to where their product becomes part of a magic quadrant. Like, I'm not saying that you have to pay the money to do it. But what I am saying is that I've heard from people that unless you adopt the process of, being on their quadrant, which apparently involves money, then you won't show up, right? So a lot of times it becomes it's like a club, you have to pay the.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I think they're doing a service of providing guidance, whether or not that guidance fits your organization. Like you said, there's lots of providers out there that aren't on the Gartner list. And
Yeah.
I think there's other areas they can be in. There's the Forrester, there's so many other ones. But I would hope, and it's just like on your car, right? If you put the OBD sensor in where it uploads your driving telemetry, you get a lower rate. Right?
Yeah, that never worked out for me.
Well, I mean,
but it was possible.
But in that scenario, like you chose a different, personal direction.
Yeah.
But if you follow the guidelines and you fit within their norms, you see a benefit. So I think that I can see the perspective of the insurance provider saying, hey, we know these products, like the holy trinity of, like CrowdStrike, Zscaler, and Okta, right? Like they're the big boys in the industry, right? And they're there for a reason. CrowdStrike got a little kick in the teeth, but it wasn't a security problem.
But their stock is back. Have you seen it?
Have you ever? I'll have to find it and send it to you. But there's someone I can't remember. I don't even know if he's like a finance person, but he's like by the breach.
Yeah.
There's probably one or two, but I'll just say, hyperbolically, there has never been a company that has seen a major impact from a data breach that their stock didn't come right back.
Oh, really? So that's just to clarify, that's not financial advice.
This is not financial
That's
advice.
not financial advice.
But again, this is third-party conversation filtered through my poor brain. But like he was basically saying, like, he went back and looked at, like, CrowdStrike, Palo, I'm trying to think of like big Cisco's had a ton. SolarWinds, are they publicly traded still? I don't know. I have to look. But there's always a significant drop. And generally within a certain amount of time, they're right back where they were, if not higher.
Yeah, I think CrowdStrike got under 200, and now it's at like 355 or something.
Everybody knows who CrowdStrike is now. Oh, why didn't I buy CrowdStrike?
I mean, my flight was canceled, so
I was literally waiting on a Delta flight. I had to switch over to an Alaska Airlines because Delta wasn't flying.
Well, at least you didn't have to get transferred to a Spirit.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with them anymore.
Yeah, just like little weird stuff like that. So they're proposing, in their opinion, less risky technologies that do a better job of making companies secure and giving you an incentive to do that. Yeah.
But does that ever backfire where the companies that are recommended? So think of so when I think of that, I think of like property management, right? If you have properties and you live out of state and you want someone managing them for you, something breaks, a water heater. You're not going to fly back to your house to change the water heater. You don't necessarily want to call someone random. So you go to the property manager and say, hey, who do you know? Right? And everyone, this isn't like things that people don't know, but like it's very common that they have a list of preferred vendors.
Yeah.
Right? And it's also very common to find out that those preferred vendors pay them a percentage.
It's very possible.
Right? So if it
I think that there needs to be some investigation, absolutely. But, it's an interesting industry shift.
Yeah. So basically what you want to do, the next business to go off is an insurance broker for cyber.
I'm sure they're doing just fine.
Because
well, no, actually I take it back. I think that premiums are going to go up a lot. Because I've seen a lot of, and I have to pull something, I can't remember, but there's been at least 2 articles that I've read in the last 6 months that talk about how much cyber liability insurance programs are losing money because their actuarial tables are wrong because of underreporting of incidents. And I think the SEC is seeing some of that with their new requirement because they're getting flooded so much that they can't keep up. And they're coming back and saying, well, this isn't material. Why did you submit this? right? So they're trying to educate people, but people are like, I don't know what's material. Like there's no definition, so they're just submitting everything. So I feel there's a lot of underreported potentially
Yeah.
breaches.
Well, for sure, because you have to think of what's the incentive of the business to report it, especially if they're not publicly traded.
Yeah.
I mean, well, even more so if they're publicly traded. Like, I'm sure there are things
Well,
that
at least
happen.
publicly traded now has requirement. Like SEC has hard requirements. You know, you've got like FINRA, you've got HIPAA, you have governing bodies for public company, but private companies.
There's no 10K, right? So, like, did anything happen? I don't know.
No.
Did Bob see anything?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, I think that most private companies operate under the auspices of, you know, transparency, right? They want to make sure their clients and customers feel that you're being upheld to the same standard.
yeah.
Right?
Yeah, but I think of, going back to human nature is like, if you break something in your house that belonged to your parents, like, you just kind of put it back broken.
I mean, that's where privacy steps in, right? Like CCPA, CPRA, doesn't matter if you're, I think, over 50 people or whatever, right? Like they have private company regulations too.
Okay.
That's where the states are starting to step in.
Mhm.
But again, if you work for a company that operates in multiple states,
Becomes a
maybe
disaster.
multiple countries, it's a nightmare. Like to keep track of it, maintain it. You almost need like a Rosetta Stone to figure it all out.
Yeah, it doesn't get any easier, does it?
Nope.
But you still do it.
Yep.
So there has to be a passion for it.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I mean, that's what I love to do, right? Like, there's a reason I do what I do. Like, if I didn't like it, I wouldn't
So
do it.
what I always find interesting is like, where did that start for you?
I've always been like on the like tinker kind of side of, like take stuff apart, figure out how it works. So then, as you grow older, you kind of start to recognize your strengths and capability, right? So I've always been really good at like pattern matching recognition. So that led me into IT, right? Like I love computers and, kind of the capability there. That led me into data and analytics, which then fed into cybersecurity, right? There's a lot of data in cybersecurity, and then creating intelligence, creating patterns, communicating, taking a technical control and documenting it, and then, aligning it to monetary risk, right? Like those are big leaps that you need to make sometimes to make the business understand why you're doing certain things. So that kind of stuff is just exciting to me and it interests me. That's kind of where I am today.
Do you think you're going to retire as a CISO?
I don't know. I've always thought about going into like education. Like, go work at ASU or something.
You want to be with Lester?
Yeah, why not?
So would you want to do that to teach it or to work within the corporate environment?
No, I'd want to be like an educator probably.
You know what's interesting is that there's a lot of people that come through and that end up doing that.
Yeah.
Right. So Lester, right, with ASU, right. But I think he's part of some of the programs that they have there at ASU.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Is any of that public yet?
Yeah. It should have been.
No.
Yeah. No, it was actually. Yeah.
Okay.
There was a time where you like.
Yep.
But yes, there was a thing on LinkedIn that I saw. Put a little green clap on it. So yes, there's that. There's obviously Mike with GCU. Kim Jones does a lot of, I think it's Boise State. So he's out in the Utah area doing a lot of stuff for them, and I think he does a few other things. But there's a lot of people that always people that are either have been through here or that I hear about from within the community, that the education ends up kind of being like the ride off to the sunset.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of it is tied to giving back, right? Like being able to take your knowledge and pass it on, right? Like cybersecurity is sometimes a black box, right? Like, because you're all kind of insulated and working on things that you can't talk about a whole lot. So even being able to distill that into the next generation, right? Because we need more cybersecurity professionals. If we believe the anecdotal, job vacuum that we've got. Alternatively, the U.S. still has a significant gap in cybersecurity skills. So even if it's just like, a 101 course on personal cybersecurity hygiene, having that knowledge and capability is going to be important as we keep growing as a nation.
So do you think that that goes back to just the community as a whole is very like tight knit, and
Yeah.
it kind of it almost feels like a family to where you would do things for your family that you wouldn't do for a stranger. So it's almost like being part of the world of security kind of creates this like second family of a sort where you kind of you don't necessarily view it
Yeah.
as like your family, but you kind of see it as a community that you want to contribute to.
Oh, absolutely. I think that cybersecurity is definitely it. It's greater than the sum of its parts, right? Because of the kind of multipliers that are in the space, like giving back, communicating, educating.
Hmm.
Security is all about communicating, right? Like threat intel. Look at all the intelligence programs and intel sharing. The ISACs and the various different. Even here like ACTRA and InfraGard,
Hmm.
right? Like there's a lot of collaboration, a lot of communication, because it is, you might see something in your network,
Yeah.
but the same guys are in my network and I didn't see it. But if you give me an IP or an IOC, I'll put it in mine. Maybe I light up like a Christmas tree,
Yeah.
right? Like or hey, you saw it, you let me know, heads up, block these IPs, right? That prevents that from ever happening. So it's
It's
you know
very much like a neural network,
okay,
right?
AI.
Neural networks. Yeah, I think that's the one thing that I've seen too is there's a lot of information sharing, and some of the research that I've done, like even with the state of Arizona, you'll see that the different agencies
Mhm.
all communicate with one another, and they all talk to each other,
Yep.
the different departments, and it's like something might happen over here. Not that anything ever happened, but like if something were to happen, that gets communicated out to you know I don't even know how many agencies there are, but we'll just say hundreds, and then those others look like you said the IOC. They take it and say,
Mhm.
oh, like how let me check on this, and then boom, boom, and it kind of like lights up. It's like, oh, shut it down, right? And that's kind of like we talked about at lunch, where it's like being able to talk with others within the community and having such a close knit community just makes it better for everyone to be safe because you're sharing, like you said, threat intel among the different people.
Mhm.
But I always do find it interesting that, like, something else that we talked about is how it's not that it's only in security, but it seems to be more predominant in the security world because in other areas you have businesses that are competing for market share,
Yeah.
and that potentially not security specific, but things that are being done within the business
Yeah.
might be IP to the business, and as a result, will never be shared. That gets locked away somewhere. But it's almost like provides like a sense of hope.
Yeah. I mean, on the flip side is it's nobody wins, right? If there's an incident or a data breach or, the only people that win are the bad actors.
Yeah.
So it's, more of a collaborative supporting kind of mentality.
So not in like anything current. Have you ever been a part of a breach?
Yeah. I've been in war rooms and,
Yeah.
calls where you can't say anything. The lawyers have to talk for you. And,
Really?
there's like real scenarios where, in probably 3, 4 jobs ago where, issues happen and, you've identified threat actor and then you have to kind of like roll back what happened and how it happened and why it happened. And, then you also have to provide guarantees that it's not going to happen again. And,
Hmm.
all the different things that happen with an incident, right? Like declaring an incident is like, the last stage that you get into for like alerts and detection and stuff like that. So,
Is that the worst part of the job?
it's probably the most stressful just because it's generally something bad happened.
So there's always this question that you always hear at events. It's like, what keeps you up at night, right? So is the actual
So
answer to that
I'm lucky.
reporting?
I've got a great team. So like I would say, knock on wood, whatever. Nothing really keeps me up at night. Being in the role I'm in now, one of the other benefits is I've been in other roles that have significantly higher stakes, right? Working in healthcare.
Oh, for sure.
Like real lives are
Hmm.
on the line if you do something stupid.
Hmm.
You know, in the industry I'm in now, it critical, client impact, those are real problems. But at the end of the day, if we solve the incident in an hour, we solve the incident in 4 hours. As long as we have the money's not flying out the door.
Yeah.
People aren't dying on a table, right? Like, so you can put it in perspective. So that's one of the nice, good or bad, right? Like the perspectives that I can kind of have in my role today, and it helps with my stress, right? Like my real world daily is like, okay, I can compartmentalize it. I can be like, hey, yeah, this is important, but like I've been in other situations where it's a little bit more critical, and you can kind of differentiate that a little bit. It's important.
Do you think that, like, based on the stakes, it could spill into your personal life?
You can't be in this role and not have the job be in your personal life. Like
you said so that they will always mix.
Absolutely.
There's some form of mixing.
There has to be. Yeah, I mean, whether it's just as simple as being on vacation and checking an email, or up to including managing an incident overnight or weekend. Like, you can't disconnect it. So it's about working with it and managing it and compartmentalizing and prioritizing, right? Like, you have to set priorities no matter what you do.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess I'm not in the role, right? Clearly, like, it's more so I have my own things that I work on, right, and things that kind of take up my time and we'll say kind of like pull me away from family things. But I've always wondered, like, is there anyone in any role within security at management or above where they don't mix? And I don't think I've ever heard that they ever are completely separated.
I would say that a lot of times the roles themselves attract a certain individual that they don't mind that blend.
Okay.
There's a reason burnout in cybersecurity, even in like the security operations level, right? Like think the SOC is your entry level, like, it's service desk on steroids, right?
Yeah, well, definitely.
You're constantly inundated, and everything is like a potential problem, right? Anything can be escalated to an incident. Like, so it's that you're not getting a mouse and keyboard replaced. You're getting somebody logged in from China at 2 a.m. and have credentials and have been in your network for 2 hours. Like that, like kind of scary stuff. But so I think it attracts a certain type of individual, or people think they know what it is, and when they get in, they're like, "Ooh, yeah, this isn't my bag." Right? So it self filters fairly quickly.
Yeah,
I think so. Once you get up into the leadership roles, you've either been a leader for a long time and you already have kind of like your work life balance figured out, or it consumes you, right? And all you do is work. You always hear about the 20-hour CEOs and that kind of stuff, right? Like there's those mentality people, and then you've got the people that self-select themselves out, like, oh, I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
There's absolutely, like, prior, there's a reason I've moved to different roles in my career, because there are benefits to move into certain roles, and there's downsides, and you have to weigh those no matter what you do. So in a CISO role, I feel in general, it's about wanting to protect the individuals you work with and you work for. Right. So there's definitely, and I get a lot of that from my healthcare background. Okay. Right. The first company I worked for, their motto was, the only interest to be considered is the interest of the patient. Right. So that ingrains in you kind of a mindset. Yeah. So, translating that into cybersecurity, it's protecting clients, company, and employees, right, from potential malicious things, whether it's people, processes, technologies, and how do you do it in such a way that it is seen as an accelerator, not a boat anchor.
Yeah.
Right. And that's a a fine line. The safest network is the one that's not connected.
Yeah, but that's also not a business,
Right?
right? Like,
So you got to use that. It's those diametrically opposed decisions that you have to make as a leader to kind of figure out, okay, where's that nuance?
yeah,
Is it going to be more permissive, and maybe the business moves a little faster, and but maybe we're putting clients' information at risk,
hmm
or is it more restrictive, where maybe our salespeople aren't out there able to just wheel and deal and grind and
yeah,
be anywhere, anytime, and dialing that in. And then you also need feedback from your executive leadership, right? Like they have to give you their risk profile. And if you've got the most innovative CEO in the world and they want to do everything, and then you have to like kind of figure out
how to mold the clay to them.
your risk profile to fit within that niche. And they also have to understand that comes with potential costs, right?
Yeah.
The fast, cheap, or good.
What,
Right?
pick two? Yeah. Fast, cheaper, good pick two. So I know. So the place that you're at now is a lot smaller than a Fortune.
Hmm?
I think 10 where you've been
Yeah.
before, right?
Yeah, they're number 25 on like the financial services
Okay.
index.
So one thing that I think is interesting, and this has come up a couple times, is velocity,
Hmm?
right? And this kind of goes back to you want it, like how you said, good, cheaper, fast, right? There are, some roles that exist that specifically focus on how to turn security into an enabler of business, right? So I'm curious on, you know, do you kind of see that right now where you kind of lead the charge with that? Or is that does that tend to fall in specific organizations and it's more so like an unnamed process that exists in the smaller ones? Because I think what it goes back to is culture, right?
Yeah.
If the managing the risk and accepting the risk culturally has a certain weight that carries into whether or not a business is more agile,
Mm-hmm.
maybe is a good word for that, for having a higher propensity of, we'll say, velocity, right? And if culturally security is viewed as a certain way, I think just by nature, like default, it it kind of eliminates any sort of acceleration in the direction that you want, right?
I mean, that is the job of a CISO, is defining that narrative.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting, and that's why so many people say, oh, the CISO needs to be in front of the board or the CEO or even reporting structure, right? Because you need to articulate your program from the lens of business value.
Yeah,
So you have to, that just doesn't happen, right? You have to be able to create that narrative of this is why we're doing these things
mm-hmm.
to keep you safe, but this will enable you to do these things which drive and accelerate business, right? And that's a lot of what a CISO's role. A lot of people think that from the technology perspective, right? There's two sides of security, right? There's the technology side,
Mm-hmm.
there's the paper side, right? You got your policies, your procedures, your governance, your risk, compliance, sometimes privacy, sometimes not private. And then over here, you got your infrastructure, your ticketing system, all the kind of nuance of the technology. And you have to meld those and then communicate up to executive leadership why both of these are so important and why we're spending a bunch of money on them and how those are directly associated with your salespeople or your CPAs or your whatever being able to go get better business, bigger clients, more capability, sell more widgets, whatever the business need is, you have to create that narrative. And that's a lot of what a CISO role is and should be,
Mm-hmm.
while also maintaining those two sides of security and making sure that they're very tightly coupled.
So do you think a CISO, if you were to pick one of these, would you say a CISO is the best translator of business risk to people, or they are the best salesperson?
They should be the first, right? But you can't take a very technical, just like on the sales side, you can't take a very technical widget thing and go to someone that has no concept of what
Yeah.
you're talking about You have to be able to be like, okay, well, this is endpoint security.
Yeah.
It prevents malware from stealing your data or ransomware, and then that in turn prevents you from losing your client's trust in your business. And that trust costs, over here it's $100,000, and your potential risk for losing, the data is fines of blah blah blah, or customer trust of X millions of dollars, right? That means something over here.
Yeah.
You don't get there to here, with just a product, right? Like, you have to build that narrative. So that's where the salesmanship comes in, is you have to be able to think and understand what drives them, or ask them, right? Be like, hey, what is your risk tolerance? What is your number one? And you have to go to the business partners too and work within there, because the fastest way to lose the support of your leadership is to not talk with them and understand what their priorities are.
Yeah. It almost feels like if you don't humanize it, right, in the role of what matters to you versus what matters to me, then you kind of lose the people that are willing to go along the journey with you.
Yeah.
Right.
So what I'm seeing is, because CISOs are having to bake in this crucible of risk, compliance, articulated into business speak, work collaboratively with business leadership, they're almost creating like this CIO role out of themselves, right? It's like, so I've seen more and more CISO CIOs lately. I don't know if you've seen that shift at all, but I've seen those roles kind of coming back together, or a CISO, maybe the CIO retires, kind of, I can save a ton of money. I can just have one guy do both jobs, right? Like, that's how you probably frame it, but I've seen that in a couple companies.
Yeah. So I'll quote Bindi, and I'm not sure where she got it from, but maybe she came up with it too, right? And she says multiple times is, you can have business without security, but you can't have security without a business, right? So you can't have security without the business, which means that if you don't have security as the foundation, right, to the business, then it becomes really hard to run it, right? Yeah. From like a risk tolerance or risk management perspective, right?
But even saying that though, the business is accepting. They're taking a security framework and accepting the risk of not having that resource in their organization. So they're still there, but it's
so even when it doesn't exist, there's a little opt-out box.
That's literally what they're doing. They're saying, hey, like, it's just like, in Arizona, it's mandatory to buy car insurance. Other states, it's not.
Oh, yeah, okay, yeah.
But
okay.
If you're in those states and you don't buy insurance and you get in a crash, like, that's where if security is seen as an insurance policy, right? It's just there in the event of a bad thing happening. And that, I feel, is
the worst case.
The worst case for a security program.
Yeah.
When it becomes an enabler and a transparent driver to get bigger clients, get more business, go out and evangelize how great we are as a company, right? That is where you've got kind of that nice connective relationship. And it flows down to IT too. Like, you have to be partnered with IT in that conversation.
Oh, for sure. And I think maybe just based on the people that I've spoken with, it's like they, like you said, like the CISO role is kind of leaning into the CIO. But if I remove myself from the situation based on what I've heard and, from different people and maybe what I would assume to be true, if I was a CEO hiring for a role in a CIO role, and I had a CIO with infrastructure and cloud background, right? And I had another person applying for that is formerly a CIO, moved to CISO, and has a lot of experience on the security side. I would much rather pick the security-centric or is it the person with the experience
Yeah,
in
they're
security?
going to have a different perspective. And honestly, I don't know. Even if it were just a pure CISO, they're still going to
Yeah, because
understand
they're going to know what.
infrastructure. They're going to understand cloud. They're
Yeah,
going to understand desktop, right? Like because you have to know those to be able to, you have champions or captains under you that know the nuance, but you
get it.
can't advocate it because you can't, like a CISO can't smell all that security stuff. I'm gonna make a mini infrastructure or whatever, like they can't advocate that, so they need to understand
Yeah,
the nuance there. Where originally I feel the CIO again maybe kind of broke their responsibility out,
hmm
and then it's where races come in. It's like, where does that responsibility versus accountability?
hmm
And I think the accountability, the CIO didn't want it, so they broke it out. But you can't advocate that responsibility.
Well, someone always has to pay.
Yep.
Like someone has to pay the piper, right? Is that the phrase?
And if you don't hire the security guy, usually it's the CEOs, the DPO that is going to get nailed.
Yeah, it just it's interesting to hear like it phrased that way because I'd never heard that before, right? That the CISO role is kind of born as a and maybe when we started I said scapegoat, right? And that's probably like the worst thing because it's not necessarily scapegoat, right? Because scapegoat infers that there is blame to be accepted, right? I think it's more so just, and maybe this is a better phrase, is the punching bag, right?
It's a punching bag, or it's there was a need because the CIO didn't have the expertise
Mm-hmm.
to be able to properly manage the team that was needed, right? Like, because it's a huge responsibility, and maybe they spent so much time focusing on security, then all of a sudden, customer satisfaction was going down and business issues, So it's I think it was a necessary evil originally because it wasn't like CISO wasn't a thing.
Yeah.
It was kind of like, oh, everybody's part of security. Well, when you're in charge of security and customer satisfaction, and you're only getting incentivized on customer satisfaction, yeah, right. So now they couldn't take responsibility, to use a hot take word around that because they couldn't focus on it because they weren't incentivized. Whereas I think the CISO is, or they're put in a role where they're responsible and accountable for that, and there's real ramifications.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think, but that's in any role, right? Like when you think about this setup, right? I just show up, press the button, record, right? And send off files. At one point, I was doing this stuff, right? I was doing a lot of it, if not all of it. And now it's just like, well, I'd rather just pay someone to do that, right? So you just hire someone to do it. Now we have two people that do it, right?
But now the CISOs are like, I shouldn't report to the CIO. I should report to CEO, right? Like there's this fracturing of that kind of responsibility, and the filtering causing problems still potentially.
Because I think what happens is you end up playing the telephone game.
Yeah.
And if you're playing telephone, I mean, I haven't played it in a long time, but
there's vulnerability patching.
Yeah.
Go through like.
If I were to explain it.
Yeah, like.
You want me to explain it to you?
No, I'm just like I think that's a great example. Like I've seen people say like, oh, well, patching should be security's responsibility. What do you think about that?
Ooh, you're trying to catch me in a web.
No, it's like a real problem.
My opinion on security patching should be a security thing. I think there are a few different roads that you can go down. The easiest one is to hire a managed service to do it for you. But if you can't afford to do that, or you don't have the ability to pay someone that's professional at doing it, that you can hold accountable to some extent, then security kind of becomes the next best person because they understand it. But then do they get the responsibility for something that's not even theirs?
Welcome to the web of accountability and responsibility, and so, security cares the most about vulnerabilities, right? Like at the end of the day, they're getting the alerts, they're tracking them down, they're documenting. Then you throw it over the fence, and maybe the infrastructure guys do the servers, desktop guys do the desktops. Okay, well, OS patch. Well, what about application patches? What about 0 days? What about SL? Like all about building an incident, a vulnerability management program. But you're still, it's kind of like the old, before DevOps was the new hotness.
Before,
right?
okay, yeah.
Like you had your developer, they'd code it up on their laptop, they'd throw it over to the infrastructure guys to deploy on the server. It's not working on the server. Works fine on my laptop. Figure it out. I'm gonna have a good one. Bye. Right? Whereas DevOps is like all about integration, continuous improvement, deploying live pipelines, code, infrastructure as code, all that stuff, because of that disconnect. In security, I think we've got similar gaps of, and just using vulnerability and patch management as an example, where security a lot of times is the one accountable, or we're accountable, but not responsible.
That's right? It's a weird gray area to be in.
It is, but I mean that's so much of why these two separate teams causes this weird friction.
Yeah.
Whereas before it used to be like, hey, infrastructure guys, you're in charge of security, you patch servers, vulnerability. There's this disassociation sometimes now, and I'm not saying everywhere, but just as a industry trend, it feels like, a lot of that, open, frank conversation doesn't happen because it's seen more as like a separation of responsibilities.
Well, I think it doesn't happen because the outcome, right? Like when I think of being a kid and breaking something, that's going back broken. I don't know how it showed up there. It was broken, right? And it's like you don't want to get in trouble for breaking something, but the reason you get in trouble is because maybe culturally that was the norm, right? Yep. If you get caught, sometimes people say, "Don't bring me problems, bring me solutions." My personal opinion is that's like the biggest pile of like horse poo, right? And I'll tell you why I say that is because when I think about that out loud, if you're saying don't bring me problems, bring me solutions, what you're insinuating is that the person that uncovers something knows how to solve it. And if they, in the situation where they don't, which is very possible, what's going to happen? They're just not going to say anything.
Yeah.
Because culturally you built something where it's like, if you're going to bring a problem, you better tell me how to fix it. Well, I know there's a problem, but I don't know how to fix it, so I guess I'm just not going to say anything, right? Because then you show up and you say, well, we have this problem. Okay, how are you going to fix it?
I have no idea.
I have no idea, right? Yeah. But if it's more of a, I want to know about all the problems and we'll work together and find a solution, I think it ends up becoming a better outcome because then it's like you are incentivizing people to speak up.
Yeah. You create a space to be wrong too.
Yeah. But not only that, you're providing a space to say anything. That's not just how to fix something, right? And the biggest problem is the one that we don't know about, right? If you think about if there's a threat actor in your network and you don't know about it, that's a pretty big problem. I would much rather know that they exist and know how to work on, we'll say, remediating that than not knowing at all. So, and that's the basis when I say the biggest problem you have is the one you don't know about, right? You don't know what you don't know type of mentality. So if you're operating in this from the space of don't bring me problems, bring me solutions, you're kind of cutting out the opportunity to present things that maybe you just don't know about. Yeah. And then, of course, when you do that, you kind of cut out the opportunity for growth because now there's no opportunity to learn from a problem that exists as a team collectively, right? And I think what it really comes down to is, just thinking out loud and thinking about the people that I've spoken with is like security is more so a cultural thing. And it's built by the leaders, not just security leaders, but by everyone. But they all have to play nice, right? And if you can create an environment where it's okay to be wrong and okay to bring problems up, but work together to fix them, you end up finding a company that probably does a lot better than the other ones, right? And, I guess this would be quoting Kim, where he quoted something else where the amount of the innovation at an organization is directly correlated to the amount of acknowledgement, congratulation, and incentivizing people to do it, right? Incentivizing people with not like monetary, but saying like, like a good job or like congratulations, and like fostering the sense of accomplishment. Because what you'll find is that the more people feel appreciated and the more they feel accomplished or fulfilled in their role, the more they will do better in that, the better that they will do, right? So there's like this direct correlation between the amount of support that people get, and maybe not necessarily support, but maybe more so.
You need to give them breathing room to work.
Yeah,
like you have to you can't inundate them with work, you have to let them think outside a little bit.
Yeah.
Right? Like you have to give, and some of that is cultural, some of that is staffing, right, appropriately, and creating, like I do read-only Fridays.
Wait, what?
Read-only Fridays.
What is that?
Where it's like you don't do anything but learn. Like you can't, no changes, no, new configuration. Like it's all about like, documenting something or taking a class or.
So it's like a development day.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. When you said read only, I thought you meant like books only, and like you shut off your computer.
No.
It's like stuff.
No. Just like don't do any like changes. No real work, I guess.
So no cutovers on a Friday?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's the worst idea ever. I don't think there's ever been a change order or change done on a Friday night that's gone well for anyone.
Nope.
I think it's just built to go wrong. I've never heard of a read-only Friday. That is kind of interesting, where it's kind of like 20% of your week is spent on becoming better.
Yeah.
Right, learning.
Or at least catching up on your tech debt. Like if you're like need to document something or you need to update something, documentation wise, or just give people the freedom to think about something other than this ticket or this request or this chain. Like you need to create that separation from just the do.
So I like that, and I'm gonna tell you why I like it, because it's something he just said. So when we had Mike in here, this is Mike Bonner, one of the things that he said was threat actors are tech debt collectors.
Yeah.
Right? And what's interesting about what you just said was that Fridays are the read-only days, and they're the days that you spend fixing or updating stuff, which would reduce your tech debt, right?
Yeah.
So if you have a one day geared towards only learning or eliminating tech debt, that's almost like the phrase where they say 1% better. Yeah, eventually you'll be way better,
No new bad or
Yeah, like long term, like over the course of time, like one raised to the 1.01 is will grow. Exponentially is the wrong word there, but it'll grow at a faster clip than whatever, right? And I think that's actually pretty cool, because it's like if you know that the debt exists, but you take 20% of your week.
What company have you ever been that didn't have tech debt?
That they spoke about willingly?
Just in general, like
I mean, I don't know.
That's the nature of the animal, right? Like
I probably got tech debt in the set somewhere, I would argue everyone has it.
Yeah.
But I don't think everyone has a day geared towards linking paid efforts towards it. I think a lot of times it's like, here's this deadline, we have to do this, we got to make this, but it's like
squeeze it in somewhere.
You rush to the finish line and then you forget things.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever you rush to do something and you get to the end and it's like, oops, I made a mistake, you could just be like, oops.
Yeah.
And then you have all these problems to fix for. But if you took some time out to fix things or go back and review, you're less likely to have an incident later. And maybe that's just like anecdotal, but I'm sure it would ring true in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
So I like that. And that's kind of like one of the fun things too, is like you talk to different people and I, in my head, like just like dots are connecting.
Similar threads, right? Like it's
Yeah, it all makes sense. What I will say though is I think we've been going for like 3 hours. Did you know it's been 3 hours?
Yeah, it was. We did pretty good actually. Has it been? Where are we at? 2 hours there, isn't it? At 2:49.
Yeah, it's going on like 3 hours.
Probably need to wrap it up here a little bit.
Yeah, no, I figured I'd ask because I think I have to take my kids to jujitsu, and I probably should head home in like 40 minutes or so. Let me see here. But I usually like to, towards the end, is, I've been the one asking a lot of questions. So to be honest, you've asked a couple of questions too. And I think I answered them all right. I did decent.
There's no right or wrong, right? It's a conversation.
There's right or yeah. But there's definitely wrong answers, right? And I'm sure so I've learned along the way that, certain things like scapegoat, in the beginning I said it is the first thing that came to mind. It's probably the worst word ever, right? But that's how we started this thing. And it's all about the journey. You kind of learn along the way that, well, maybe just a better way is just a punching bag. And the punching bag, because of, like you said, where CIOs just don't necessarily have the desire because they're incentivized for different things.
Yep.
So they kind of just, pass it on to someone else, right? And that's, maybe that's where the security role is born. But usually towards the end, I always like to say, hey, like, I've been the one grilling, not necessarily grilling, but just more so kind of leading the things, right? And I always like to open up and say, hey, like, what are things? So picture me as like a salesperson, right? Because technically that's kind of what I do, right? I'm in sales. I guess everyone's in sales. My opinion is everyone's in sales. You're just either good at it or you're bad. And, you can figure that out based on, how you feel about just whatever, like life in general. Like if you're happy with it, you're probably a pretty good salesperson because you get what you want, right? So I like to always open it up and say, like, feel free to ask me anything. So now I'm going to jump off the soapbox.
Yeah, no, I mean, like you said, I think I've been asking you questions. I know both sides of the fence too, from a customer and sales perspective. So I have a lot of nuance in that conversation.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of things in the world that I think you understand that most people don't.
Yeah.
Because you've kind of swam the waters, right? You've been through it. But that probably gives you an upper, what did I say?
An upper hand.
Yeah, I was going to say upper leg, but that doesn't make any sense. Upper hand, right? Upper hand in a lot of like negotiation and things like that, and just understanding like
margin and reg and all the various different
the things that are on like partner agreements that like, hey, like you better not say nothing about this. Which, you run across every now and then. But yeah, I think it's really one of the main reasons why I wanted to talk to you was because, you had both sides of the fence, right? And I think you have a lot of from the client side to the vendor side back to the client side. Mm-hmm. And I think, we didn't dive too deep into it, but, there was burnout at some point, right? And I think, I don't know which one, I'm guessing it was the client side to the vendor side, or maybe the burnout happened.
I mean, for me, the biggest shift in leaving the sales side of things was the lack of a good partner. The last kind of sales role I was in that kicked me over to the startup was my sales partner was MIA for almost 12 months.
As in, like, you were out closing deals?
Yeah, I was traveling to the customer. I was working with them, and they wouldn't come to calls.
But they were playing golf.
No, they weren't even like talking to the customer. The customer thought I was their salesperson, not their engineer.
But you weren't getting paid for the sales?
No.
No, that's why you left. Yeah. I've seen that happen, where a lot of times it's just like...
but they wouldn't do anything about it. Like, everybody knew, but there was other problems that they need to worry about. It's not a super exciting story. It's just more annoying than anything. Yeah,
well, actually, so it's a very similar story to Andy. Do you know Andy from New Genesis?
I'm horrible with names.
So shout out to Andy. He was guest number 2. He actually runs New Genesis Solutions out of Arizona here. If you know Scott Jones just started working with him. He's, I think, VP of Sales or VP of Sales and Marketing. So Andy helps run CactusCon.
Okay.
So Andy is the person behind the CISO track on Saturdays. So if you happen to do the CISO track at CactusCon, Andy is the main person that kind of puts that all together. And actually, funny enough, like that suitcase over there and that big black box out here in the main office area is something that I'm building for CactusCon.
All right.
So I'm essentially taking the entire set and dropping it into a box, 2 boxes that I can roll up and help record it for them.
Okay.
So like instead of that computer over there and everything that's on that desk, we're gonna throw it into that box. It has wheels, and I can essentially go mobile.
Yeah.
So like next week when I'm at reInvent, I'll have all that with me. So basically,
Find it out.
yeah, I'll basically be able to. I think we have a suite at the Venetian reserved to bring people in and do recordings. So like all these cameras will come up and all the wiring will stay, but lights will stay. But I've got the tripods and everything, so I can essentially I'm mobile now. Well, not yet. I got a few more parts
You gotta
coming
figure
in.
it out.
But
I've heard the good things about the new Mac Mini, the new.
the one with the power button on the bottom.
Yeah, but like it's like you can run 6 8K streams live recording and like stitch them together, and it's pretty powerful.
I'm sure you could. I don't.
And it's a little silent.
Yeah, I don't have one of those. I might get something similar to it, if not that. But with what I have, the recorder and the switcher and everything else, they kind of work independently from a computer.
Mm.
So like that live feed that you see is straight from the switcher that I have on the desk. So it's the only thing that's recording is the sound.
Gotcha.
But the sound also is the backup version, whereas the primary goes directly to the stuff. But yeah, no, we'll be over at AWS reInvent next week. I think we've got like 2 or 3 recordings scheduled.
Nice.
So I'll be out there doing that, just kind of seeing where it takes me. But yeah, I mean, I just have fun just talking to people. And like the best part about it is it's not like a sales pitch. Like a lot, like we talked about, like a lot of webinars are just a sales pitch disguised as a webinar. There's just a lot of conversations that happen that are kind of steered a certain way based on whoever is sponsoring it. Nobody's sponsoring this yet. So it's just me, and I get to kind of just go wherever I want to go.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think really what I'm getting at is, thank you for coming out here. You have a 50-minute drive back or so.
That's Arizona. Phoenix.
Yeah, especially right now, we're heading up towards 3:30, so you're gonna hit the rush hour. But no, I mean, if there's no last questions for me, I think we can just wrap it. But I always like to offer it.
Yeah, it's been great. I appreciate it. I learned things too while I was here. It's always good to
You
learn
did?
something. Yeah.
Well, give me 2 takeaways.
Definitely liked your perspective on kind of like the sales motion and where the partnership versus the kind of mindset behind what a salesperson is was a good conversation, I felt. And then you taught me about the Tinder.
The Tinder swindler.
Tinder swindler.
Tinder swindler. That's a good story.
Oh no, yeah.
Actually, do you watch a lot of Netflix or no?
Not really. Yeah.
Do you have a Netflix account?
Yeah.
Because if you want, I'll give you my account. You can watch it. If you don't have it, but if you have it, I think it's on Netflix. It might be on Prime. Just look up Tinder swindler.
Tinder swindler. I'll
Just
check it out.
Tinder and then swindler. I say swindler like without the ER, right? Because it just sounds cooler. But it's actually interesting, very eye-opening on what this whole pig butchering thing is. But they don't call it pig butchering. And I think my understanding of pig butchering is fairly accurate. But it's more so like for people in a business where it's threat actors doing it.
Yeah,
for
I mean
the intent.
it's fishing, it's spear fishing, it's it's vishing, it's all social engineering at the end of the day.
Yeah,
Grift has been around
yeah,
for a lot longer than you and me.
yeah. Grifters are the best salespeople in the world because they get what they want, right? Or that's probably a very accurate statement. They talk you into something.
That's the black hat versus the white hat in cybersecurity, right? Like, it's same thing.
There's always the good angel and the good angel in the white, and then the red angel on the other shoulder.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm actually pretty excited that you Tinder swindler. That's good, but I like the other one about the sales part because it's like my biggest struggle with early on in my sales career is, and I've talked about this before, is I have a really hard time reaching out to people in executive leadership because Andy called it imposter syndrome, which is probably fairly accurate, but I think I qualify just a little bit. But my biggest issue was I never proactively reached out to people in executive roles.
Yeah.
And my reasoning for it was, what do I have to add? There's nothing I can really
Yeah.
say. But I didn't think about, I could teach them about Tinder Swindler. I didn't think about, like perspective.
Yeah.
So now whenever anyone comes in here, it's just another person across from me. Like titles go out the door. I don't necessarily care about them anymore. Like to me, it's just, I've been able, what this has been able to do for me is to sit down with anyone, no matter who they are, and just have a conversation, like person to person, and hopefully pick up a few things. And I'm gonna start asking this at the end, like, is there anything that I taught you, right?
Yeah.
Because I think it's actually pretty cool to hear, like, it's obviously nothing like specific to security, but maybe it's like an outsider perspective or just a
I mean,
layman's
I liked
perspective.
your original component of like you're learning security, right? Like that wasn't what you grew up in, right? At the end of the day, you probably sold security products or so you understand the language and some of that stuff, but you're also coming at it from the perspective of you're trying to better yourself, so that's why you're interviewing candidates, right? Like you're learning from them too about like the nuances of security, or even at an executive level, like CEO, CIO, CDO, CRO. They're all going to have like different spins on similar topics, and then you can kind of stitch those together into a much more interesting conversation.
Yeah, I will say one thing that's come out of this too is there's a lot of people reaching out to me saying, "Hey, do you know this person pretty well?" Like past guests, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
"Well, I mean, how do you define pretty well?" And they're like, "Do you think you can help me with the meeting?" Like, oh gosh. So we had to figure out, and this is something that this came to me the other day. Is like, I wonder if there's a way to like, because you know how marketing exists, and they pay for thousands of dollars to get in front of people. Like, I thought it would actually be pretty cool to have something like that where if guests come through and someone wants to get a meeting with them, that they provide some sort of foundation or nonprofit that they resonate with. Because I don't want to say how many I get, but I get a good amount of calls where people are saying, "Hey, can you help me with this person?"
I'll lead gen.
Yeah, right. And it's like, well, yeah, but like they don't come on to be sold.
Yeah.
Like, so I don't want to turn it into where the chair becomes a sales lead, right? But what I thought would be pretty cool is if I offered up like some sort of foundation where people that are interested in having a meeting or talking to someone that's been on say, look, you go here and you donate to this cause, and we'll try and do something. I don't know if that's good to do or bad, but
That's that bridge. It's hard to get, right? Like it's
yeah. Well, who wants a pair of AirPods, right? Or, most companies have policies where they can't accept a gift.
Yep.
But maybe if there was a foundation, it's like, would you donate to the foundation under my name?
Yeah.
Maybe that'll help. I don't know. I just think there's a lot of people out there that need help.
Yeah, I've seen like I don't know, there's so many out there. It's tough. Like, the dinners, or there's a vendor sponsoring the dinner. They get their whatever 5-minute pitch. And then you got like the Avantas, and they're all. It's hard to crack into it, and it's bridging that gap between the trusted conversation, the kind of Chatham House rules, private, interconnectivity, and then extending it into, okay, well, now you're going to get a sales call.
Yeah.
Right? That's a hard jump. It's but people can do it, right? And sometimes it's just being open and honest with your network and saying, hey, this is, and it also has to resonate with you, I think, is or you have to kind of bring in like some trusted individuals to be like, yeah, this product, or no, this is actually really interesting. Like this is a problem, and then you're presenting possible solutions, and then it's insulating from the cold call by making it more of a warm. Like, hey, I had 2 other CISOs that I know look at this. They both thought it was really cool. Just wanted to get it out there to the or see whatever you're looking at. Like I don't know, it's hard. It's a hard gap to jump.
Yeah, probably stay away from it. But I just thought I get enough phone calls from people saying, "Hey, do you think you can help with this?" And I'm like, No, because like I don't really want to ask them that. Like,
Yeah.
and so I've just kind of stayed away from it. But the other day I was thinking about, I was like, oh, I wonder if there was a donation, if people would be interested.
I mean, a lot of companies are doing that already too.
Are they?
Like
Okay.
a lot of like the speaking engagements I do,
Oh, they do.
they'll donate on behalf for charity. So I think it's getting more traction.
And obviously like I could probably cut it out too. What's like a typical going rate for like a speaking engagement for a donation?
Under $1,000.
Okay.
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 The couple that I've done are like 500.
Okay.
But anywhere, yeah. And then generally it's more like your airfare and your hotel.
Oh, okay. So they fly you. Okay. Okay. All right. Yeah, I probably won't even do that. It seems like really murky water that I don't want to be swimming in.
It's sales, man. You guys,
Yeah.
it's tough.
Yeah, but you'll never hear from me on like outside of like seeing at an event. Like,
But I mean, you're building a network. That's the main thing.
yeah. I think it's much better to know people that know people
Yeah.
than to not.
Yep.
So, and clearly that matters when it comes to getting your next role. Not that you're looking, but like a CISO role.
Yeah.
Right. 200 applications, 0 calls.
Yeah.
So, okay. Well, I guess we could just leave it at that. I think, thank you again for coming out here.
Thanks for having me.
Glad you learned a couple of things. And, we'll just, here's the last thing. So I'm in the middle of scheduling a few people between now and the end of the year. I think there's like 3 or 4 people scheduled, but I don't know the timelines of the dates.
Mm-hmm.
So here's something that I want to do. It's like, I'm going to call it like the CISO whisper, because if they happen to be a CISO, I want one of the questions to come from a past guest.
Okay.
So you can think about it or you can say it now, but one thing that I want to have is a guest, or not a guest, a question from you specifically to an unknown guest that is in the same role as you that you think would be an interesting question to ask or hear the answer for. So that didn't happen today. So none of the questions today came from someone,
Yeah.
but I think it'd be really cool to like hear your question asked of someone else in the role that for.
I've got 2.
Okay.
Should privacy be under the scope of a CISO?
Privacy. Okay. Should it be? What's your take?
It's a question.
Okay. Well, whoever the next person
It's
is.
a yes or a no. It's a weird one, right? Like, because then you get into like legal and there's a lot of back and forth on that one right now.
Okay. Well, don't answer it.
I can't answer it.
Okay. I was gonna say, I wouldn't mind hearing the answer, but I don't know if this will come out before the next person comes on. And
Yeah.
if they happen to listen, I don't want them to have a.
Nobody knows when this happened. I'm the one that.
Yeah.